Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of The Market Open. Thank you all for being here. It is a Wednesday, August 26th. We are live. Good morning, everybody. Thank you all for being here. Today's going to be a big day because we've got NVIDIA earnings. This is going to be a very, very important one. I'll be live with Tanner, Jose, and Neil at 3:30, and we'll be getting started on NVIDIA earnings. We have a relatively flat to reddish pre-market, and we'll talk about why. We got some PCE data that we just got about 15 minutes ago. Some of it's good, some of it's bad, and you're seeing some of that momentum in the pre-market to the downside. S&P 500 was green, just turned red. We also got a big lawsuit update on Meta, so we will talk about what's going on with Meta, but the obvious big story of the day is NVIDIA, and in the next 4 hours, it'll be very important to see if Mr. Jensen can put up some numbers that are really important. On top of that, not only do we have NVIDIA earnings, we do have a reporter from the Wall Street Journal who's here today.
Hi, happy to be here. My name's Hannah.
This is Hannah. She is super excited. Right, Hannah?
Oh, I'm super pumped. Happy to watch the magic of the stream from behind the scenes in my little corner over here. So nice to see all you guys.
Yeah, so she'll be watching the stream. She'll be seeing how I do what I do. So once again, when your boy makes a joke, I need the laughing emojis. When your boy has fire analysis about bond yields, I need the fire emojis. We are getting into the journal, folks. Okay? We're getting into the journal. She came in today. She was like, so what news do you read in the morning to get ready for the show? I'm like, oh, obviously the Wall Street Journal. It's like, but I actually did read an article from the Wall Street Journal, so we'll talk about that. But yeah, it should be a fun show. And should be exciting. It'll be cool to have this community that we built kind of featured in the journal and the kind of professional business media. So super excited for it. And it's a big day. So we got a lot to talk about regardless. So I think we'll have a lot to get into as we get through this market open. Triple V, thank you for being here. And thank you for the $200 super chat. There you go. We got a super chat to start off the show. Triple V is a good friend of the show. He's a real person. I've met him. Everyone in the chat thinks he's my sugar daddy. He's not my sugar daddy, but he's done really well in his life. He's a immigrant, came to this country with nothing and, built a very big business. So thank you for the super chat. Thank you for being here. And thank you for being part of the show. All right, so let's get started. I think first off is PCE. The PCE data is actually not that bad. And then we'll get into what we've got going on with NVIDIA and then this Meta lawsuit. I also did a decent chunk of buying yesterday in a variety of different names, a couple names that we've been talking about. One name I bought last night in the overnight markets based on some of the news that we got. So we'll talk about that. I do have a tight stop loss on that, though, because I'm not going to bag hold any more of it. So if the market flips red today, that will be sold. PCE data, 3.7 above 3.6. It's not the best. If it came in a little bit below 3.6, it would be nice, but obviously it's not the worst either. Core PCE was 3.3, the second highest rating since October of 2024. So obviously it's up there. Back in October of 2024, we were like pushing below 3% on core PCE, and we were also pushing 2.4 on CPI. So obviously the advance of the Iran war over the past couple of months has led to more and more of inflation going higher. Oil is actually down this morning, though, and there's some updates for why. We'll talk about what Rubio said last night in regards to what's going on with the Iran war. 80.26 on oil. Also the 10-year, it's not below 4.6 yet, but it is at 4.65. So that's below 4.72, which is nice to see. I know we've been talking a lot about bond yields. We had that Stanley Druckenmiller article that came out the other day, kind of basically saying that Bessent is pulling a gimmick and a trick in the treasury and he needs to just let the bond market speak. So this PCE data is not the best, but it's not like the market's down 2% based on the idea that it's horrible. And I think the reason that's the case is because oil is down today based on some of the Iran updates, which is kind of offsetting some of the more aggressive PCE data that we got this morning, along with GDP growth. So GDP growth came in at 1.5% annualized, which is good. I know Lutnick said we could be growing at like 6%. That's probably not going to happen anytime soon, but at least it's not below 1%. It's not at 2% yet, which is kind of, I think, the core target that the administration wanted. But the fact that it's at least pushing 1.5, obviously the majority of that GDP is CapEx. 50% of our growth right now is capital expenditures. That kind of can't slow down. And that's part of the reason why NVIDIA is a $5 trillion company. On top of that, you had durable goods orders rise 1.1%. Street expected 0.5. So that was a little bit higher than expected. And then you had personal spending rise 0.2. That was higher than the 0.1 expected. Again, just not that intense in terms of like data that's bad. I think the main thing was PCE 3.7 versus 3.6. And that's why we're slightly red. Now, again, we weren't that green in the pre-market, so we're not that red. It's like S&P is down 50 cents. But I think NVIDIA is going to be kind of the majority of the price action today outside of some of this PCE data. If this data was a lot worse than expected, we were pushing like 3.94%. I think we would be down a lot more. And quite frankly, NVIDIA wouldn't even matter that much, but relatively light reading. So it's not that big of a deal. The leather jacket's going to come out on the market close. On the market close, before Jensen speaks, we will have the leather jacket. And I'm excited because, you know, NVIDIA is going to have to put up some big numbers. The thing is, everyone knows NVIDIA is going to put up big numbers. So the question is, how big will the numbers actually be? And at this point, it's 8% of the S&P 500, you know, $5.5 trillion market cap. Can it actually get to 6-7 trillion over the next few years? And, you know, if it was reasonably valued at the price target that the analysts have on it, by the way, did you guys know the analyst price target on NVIDIA, the average analyst price target is now, let's pull up the exact number, $304. I mean, are they going to raise it to what, 350 after this earnings if the stock is still stuck? So it's one of those things where it's like the analysts, retail, everyone, sovereigns, they own the name. It's a question of, can the name get the love that it deserves to get based on putting out some earnings growth? And we're going to find out later today. So that's what we have with PCE. Not as big of a deal, but nonetheless, that is some of the data. Let's talk about Meta before we get deeper into what's going on with NVIDIA. Thank you for the fire emojis. Deeply appreciate that. Hannah, if you're seeing people are saying this is incredible analysis, just letting you know that they appreciate the analysis. So Meta, I bought some Meta last night, 25 shares at 567. Shout out to Mr. Cactus Jack, which again, if you are not part of the WhatsApp, it's a WhatsApp open source terminal that everyone gets access to. He posted this in the WhatsApp. That's how I actually got the update that this was some good news for Meta. And I bought some Meta. My stop loss is at 569. I bought it at 567. Stock's at 580 right now. But I thought the headline was finally good enough to buy some Meta. I've been wanting to buy Meta during this whole 3-week shenanigans of the court case. I obviously have a big Meta bag already. I've been bag holding it all year. I do not want to bag hold more of it, so that's why there's a tight stop loss. But if this is true, which what's the headline? Meta states discuss mid-trial settlement in teen addiction case, aka all the states that are suing Meta for all this money. At the end of the day, I don't really think they want Meta to change the addictive behaviors of I think they want money. I mean, if Meta is willing to offer them billions of dollars, there's a lot of people there that would be willing to take billions of dollars. It's not every day that a company that's as big as Meta says, hey, just take a couple $1 billion and leave us alone. And they're, you know, and Meta's probably offering this because they know they have a strong chance of losing the lawsuit. So from that perspective, it's like, okay, you pay a parking ticket, you move on as a Meta shareholder. It's worth paying the parking ticket versus having a judge completely have you redesign the entire product. So philosophically, right, there's a debate on if that's good or bad. From a shareholder perspective, this has to get over with. I mean, Meta deserves to be trading at $700, $800 a share and a reasonable multiple. I mean, it's trading cheaper than Nike right now, and it's growing 300% more than Nike, or sorry, 3,000% more than Nike. It doesn't make any sense, right? So from that perspective, I thought that was a bullish headline. I think the lawsuit ultimately can be resolved. Meta right there is pushing 580 in the pre-market. I think there's a world in which this thing gets back up to 600 relatively in a short amount of time, just based on the idea that this headwind is gone. And it would be way quicker than the Google antitrust stuff that lasted 7 months. I mean, this lasted about 3 weeks. If we can move on from this in about a month, I think that would be a very nice thing to see. So yeah, I think Meta wow. Well, Meta just got an $8. You guys just saw that, right? You guys just saw that, right? It was at 580 literally 3 seconds ago. It's at 588 right now. Wow. Okay. There you go. Well, it's now $10 away from 6. Is there some news that came out just now on that? You guys saw that, right? That wasn't just me. Yeah, you guys saw that. That was kind of crazy. I did not pump it. I can't. There's nothing I can do for Meta at the end of the day. It's a, very large company. But that candle came in. I mean, I would imagine a lot of institutions, look, this is the cheapest name in the Mag 7 now. This is one of the cheapest names in tech that's growing 30% freaking. Like, what are we talking about? This is one of the fastest growing companies in the world, one of the largest moats on the planet, and it's being discounted cheaper than consumer discretionary names that are barely growing, 2%, 3% year over year. So I do think there will be some heavy buyers that are excited today. The problem is there's also a lot of people that probably bought it at, 530, 540, 550, and if it goes to 600, they would be likely to sell and take their profit. So we got to see how much selling pressure exists with the buying pressure, but hopefully you can get some more momentum right there. Again, I think that lawsuit is probably a big catalyst if it is officially resolved. The states agreed to the claims. Is that true? Is that true? That could be the obvious headline. I don't see that. No, I did. Okay, there it is. Court filing. States Meta agree to settle claims. Wow. That's, yeah, Cactus got it right there. Thank you, Cactus. There you go, folks. Okay. It's over. I wonder if the stock still dumps today or if it just makes a run to 600. 584 right there, touch 589. Yeah, okay. So the question now is how much money? Here's the thing. If Meta's giving up like $10 billion, I don't think the street's going to be happy about that. They're going to be happy that the lawsuit is over, but $10 billion is a pretty ugly hit. I mean, I think they paid less than taxes last year than $10 billion. So it would take a hit on net income. It would be something that would be priced in immediately. But if that's over, yeah, how much is the payout? That's the question. Cactus, if you can get us the payout information, you might not have that yet, but that's really important. And then maybe this Max 7 starts partying with the other Max 7s, which have done relatively well this year and have had a lot less growth. I mean, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, Tesla. The only Max 7's growing faster than Meta is NVIDIA, you know? So it would be nice to see if this can get resolved. 587 right there on Meta. We also have a senior Iranian source to Reuters just said an agreement with Oman over the Strait of Hormuz has not yet been finalized. Iran and Oman are still working on the details of an agreement over the Strait of Hormuz. We will talk a little bit more about what's happening with Iran in a second, as Rubio made some claims last night that were important. But that in general could get, you know, the broader market to think that, okay, oil should be coming down. The headline from Bloomberg, Iran and Oman agreed to share the Strait of Hormuz revenue, which is also good because whatever fees that they were fighting over the past couple of weeks, if they can just split them 50-50 in any negotiation that they've created, is a decent revenue framework for us to be able to move forward from this. The other update on Meta, States and Meta have reached a settlement regarding allegations that their platforms harm children, and they agreed to settle claims as per court filings. Okay, for all my Meta people, today's going to be a big day then today. Let's see if we can crack through 600. If you bought the dip around that 540, 550 range on the idea that this case would not last for a long time, you were benefiting if you bought last night. And I think, you know, someone sold $5 million of puts. We talked about that yesterday at 567, literally kind of at the money puts yesterday, expiring on Friday. So you had some big money enter into, I mean, someone always knows, right? You're not selling $5 million worth of puts, which is bullish, right? Because you're wanting to get assigned on those. If you don't think that the stock is probably going to go higher and that your chance of getting assigned is unlikely, and if you do get assigned, you wouldn't be that upset in the first place. SPY right there, down about 0.15%. So it seems like that could be happening right there for Meta. Okay, so let's talk about this Iran situation. Oil is down today, 2.5%. The 10 years also down. This is what Rubio told Axios yesterday in regards to what they are thinking about with the future of this Iran conflict. And I think the market is at least somewhat starting to believe that there will be a resolution soon.
Is partially open, and President Trump has issued a new warning to the Iranian regime about keeping the Strait of Hormuz safe. The president posted to Truth Social yesterday about this waterway, what he calls a no-mine policy, saying, I have just been informed by the United States Navy that all mines have been removed and or detonated from within the international waters of the Strait of Hormuz. Iran has been notified that any ship or boat placing new mines will be immediately and systematically destroyed. He indicated that Space Force is watching every inch of the strait, as well as Iran's nuclear sites. Iranian officials continue to claim the strait is unsafe for vessels leaving the Persian Gulf. The discussion over this critical waterway comes as the United States continues to oversee millions of barrels of crude oil being exported from the Gulf each day through a southern passage. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi met Tuesday with his Omani counterpart in Tehran as the two countries continue talks toward a parallel agreement about control of the strait. Araghchi.
Bloomberg then reported this morning that negotiation between Iran and Oman is starting to come to fruition. Axios reported that Rubio said yesterday they are not willing to engage in military action anymore. They are only focused on economic pressure, which is a good thing because that's essentially what President Trump said over the past couple of days. But the fact that you've got the administration completely shifting from like, we're going to bomb these guys to, hey, like, let's set up a deal. Let's get rid of some sanctions. We talked about the news last morning that the United States already sent negotiators from the Pakistani intermediaries into Iran to be able to like tell them, hey, we'll get rid of some sanctions if you guys can easily give us the Strait of Hormuz reopening again. Means that I think the days of striking back and forth are done. And if that's a good thing, then, you know, there's a better chance than not. And I think that's why oil's down 7% over the past 48 hours. Like the market's like, all right, this shit's over. Like it's like we got to get a resolution at some point. If Stanley Druckenmiller writing an article is not going to be enough to solve this, then what is going to be enough to solve this? And at this point, it's going to be this war coming down, inflation expectations coming down, oil coming down, bond yields coming down. and the broader market moving on from what has been happening over the past 7 months. Meta agrees to pay a maximum of $16.8 billion. Goodness, bro. I remember when I was a senior at Rutgers and I used to park my car in a spot I wasn't supposed to park it, and I would get a $25 parking ticket from the New Brunswick State Police. And that was, $25 was a lot of money when you're broke and you're a senior in college. 16.8 billion is a little bit bigger of a parking ticket. That's a lot of money, dude. Meta does what? It's almost 220 billion of revenue. That's around 8 to 10%, 8 to 9.3% of their freaking yearly revenue giving back to the states. And if you're like part of the 20 states, or I think it's 29 states that are suing, if you're going to get, a couple $100 million each, like, yeah, you're going to take that deal, bro. Like, you're going to take that freaking deal. You're not going to actually try to go to trial because Meta has some good lawyers. There's a world in which Meta could win that lawsuit and then you get nothing. So if the money is enough to resolve these claims, then there you go. Is that tax deductible? That's a great question. I would imagine it is, bro. I mean, this is like, maybe it's not. I don't know. I'm not a tax expert, but at least the street is going to have to bake this into their expectations. Better right there, 593. I think 600 potentially as a push today. And if that's the case, then it's over. That's crazy, dude. Less than 3 weeks and it's over. This was supposed to last for a long time. It was supposed to at least last until October. And Zucks was just like, you know what? I've got super intelligence to build. I am not going to deal with this type of lawsuit. I probably need to do an equity offering like Google did, and I need that stock to get to like 750 in order for me to justify dumping 100 billion worth of shares on investors. We cannot have this be in the background. And I think that's why he's like, let's just pay the 16 billion and move on. So that's what you got. Meta right there, 593. Someone just said I look like this is the first day of school outfit. That's funny. That is funny. That's, this is sometimes when the Wall Street Journal's watching the show, you can't just put, if you guys actually saw the outfit though, it's socks, sandals, and basketball shorts. But you guys don't see the bottom half, so it looks professional, but it's professional with fun. It's professional with comfort. That's how we're doing the show this morning. Netflix, that's up a little bit. Uber, by the way, getting a nice little breakout. 81.65, baby, 1.62%. This stock should not be down based on Tesla robotaxi fears that have not yet to materialize. So I think it is nice to see David Tepper's buying this, Bill Ackman's buying this. You're seeing a lot more people load up on their Uber positions. It was one of the largest stocks that was bought in Q2. One of the most fundamentally sound companies, trades at 12 times free cash flow, probably deserves to be closer to a $120 stock. Getting a little bit of love. And so you're seeing the Ubers, the Metas, the Microsofts, a lot of these names that have been discounted all year starting to get a lot more excitement. Meta right there, 592 as that continues to go green. We Representative Michael Ruley. I don't know who this guy is, but every day we have our politicians that are supposed to be like making Americans' lives better, buying stocks and putting out financial disclosures, because why not? Why not? They should be trading stocks with the rest of us, right? That's why they're elected. $100,000 of Google he sold. 50 to 100,000 of Google he sold 2 days ago. This guy is an American politician for Ohio 6th Congressional District. Dude, it's been every day this week that politicians have been. We saw the Pelosi, Bloom, and Intel stuff. Obviously, we saw Trump, trading thousands of times in June. It's the wild, wild west, folks. If the politicians are getting rich off this market, we got to get rich as well. And, when companies like Meta that are fundamentally sound companies get discounted 30% year to date, those are some of the opportunities. And I think that opportunity is hopefully now being taken advantage of as this lawsuit is resolved. The agreement requires nationwide changes for teen users of Instagram and Facebook. Meta denied any wrongdoing in agreeing to settle based on the settlement papers. This nationwide change for teen users, I'm not sure what that's going to look like. I doubt that's going to be them changing the actual algorithm. Maybe it's a couple more questions of like, when you join, they ask your age and all that stuff, and people lie about that anyway. They'll probably ask another like 5 questions that people will lie about. I'm just guessing, but I really doubt there's going to be any meaningful change in the algorithm that keeps people consuming ads on Meta, because the street probably wouldn't like that. And so whatever they settled for, the 16 billion is probably more than enough to agree to some inconsequential changes on the platform. Meta right there, 596, as that continues to go green. Moderna right there, that's down 2%. That was up 20% yesterday. Air Test Systems, that's down 1.5, and then the SPY down about 0.14. So in terms of what we've got in the pre-market, PCE came in not better than expected, but barely higher than what the street wanted, 3.6 versus 3.7. That's not too bad. You got this Meta lawsuit that's probably helping tech sentiment in general. You've got NVIDIA with earnings today, which we'll talk about in a second. And then you've got oil and bond yields down. Again, the bond market has been screaming all week based on this idea of inflation expectations going higher, the war not coming to an end, and obviously a lot of corporate debt fighting with U.S. treasuries for a balance of yield. The fact that this has started to somewhat come down and relax, I mean, it's not like really at the level where it needs to be. It needs to be back to 4.2, 4.3%, which is where it was before the war started. But it's at least not pushing 4.8 anymore. I think all of that put together, along with the expectation that NVIDIA can crush, is going to lead to a relatively good day. Now, one thing I will say, if you've analyzed any of the NVIDIA quarters over the past 2 years, going into the earnings, everything dumps. And I learned this the hard way. I remember in 2024, NVIDIA dumped like 10% going into the earnings. This was February, and I sold like 3,000 shares of Hood at like $14. I bought it at like $7. I was like, no, I'm up 50%. I should take my profits. And like, obviously we saw what ended up happening to Hood. That was in my Roth IRA. But I was so scared because I was like, dude, I'm up 50%. Like I should be like taking profits here. And then NVIDIA crushed earnings, and then the market pumped the next day. Like, so I would be a little skeptical of price action that goes ugly today when the market opens, because it usually tends to do that because the market in general is trying to shake out a lot of weak hands before NVIDIA earnings. Now, NVIDIA wasn't a $5 trillion company at the time, but still, there might be a lot of manufactured selling just based on the idea that NVIDIA might be coming in through. Court judgment requires Meta default daily limits and nighttime blocks for teenage users of Meta's social media platforms. Okay, so a default daily limit means that that limit can change from just the wording of that. If it's a default daily limit, you could go into the settings and theoretically change it. Also, what age teenage users? So is that 13 to 17 nighttime blocks? I mean, most of those kids are sleeping during the night anyway. They're not, I mean, I don't think every 13 to 17-year-old is up at 3 a.m. scrolling through Facebook. Nonetheless, that could be a little bit more of a substantial change on their business. I don't know if it's enough for the street to actually be upset about it versus something like changing the algorithm. I mean, again, you got to really kind of read between the lines right here. Is the algorithm changing, which is how Meta makes their money off showing ads, or do they get a couple hours less of attention, which, yes, is bad for the business, 100%. But is it actually changing anything fundamental about the business? Not to mention, those kids are eventually not going to be teenagers, right? They're going to grow up. And if they're growing up using Instagram, Facebook, WhatsApp, Meta will have more than ample opportunity to monetize them. So if the street actually takes it down on some of these changes, it would be a little surprising, but I don't think, it's personal opinion, I don't think these changes are good enough to change the fabric of how the platform actually works, along with the $16 billion that they're paying. How does Meta verify age right now? Anyway, I haven't verified my age on Meta in a long time, so I don't even know. But I doubt they make you, maybe they make you upload your ID or your driver's license or some type of state ID or something. For the longest time, you could just lie and say you were born in like 1970 and it didn't matter. But you know, maybe they're going to upgrade some of the increased ways that they engage in that. We have another politician disclosure, Senator Kelly Morrison. She sold her SOLS, Solstice Advanced Materials. She sold her MBGL, Mobility Global, and she sold her Accenture, which has had a relatively rough year given their growth has been a little bit commoditized from AI. Although this stock was down a lot worse 3 months ago, it has had a nice rebound in like the 130s. At one point, now it's at 180. But you have some more selling from some of these politicians. All right, let's talk about NVIDIA. Let's talk about NVIDIA. Before that, Amazon just announced an acquisition. Amazon is acquiring Duck Labs to boost AWS analytics. The terms were not disclosed. Duck Labs is services for data processing. I'm on their website right now. Let's see if we can get a valuation on this. Duck Labs valuation. Last valuation was, okay, so they raised at $400 million in late 2023. There's no way they're under $1 billion. One of these websites is reporting that Amazon paid at least $1.5 billion. It's relatively not much for Amazon, but there you go. AWS acquiring another analytics platform right there. Amazon, is that green? Amazon is 261, up 0.17, slightly green. Meta agrees to pay 2.2 billion of the 16 billion to California as a part of the deal. So there you go. Californians, you get 2.2 billion out of Mr. Meta. Meta settlement resolves all state claims in federal and state courts across the country. Wow, dude. They really got rid of everything here. Dude, Zucks is ruthless. Zucks went up to his CFO and was like, just give them the money and let's move on. 16 billion. He's like, dude, we are going to spend 16 billion on Vera Rubin's next quarter. Like, we don't need to worry about another 16 billion as long as this gets rid of the headache that we're dealing with. That is crazy, but it does clear the floor. It does clear the floor. And you got a good NVIDIA earnings today. If NVIDIA, Jensen's very fond of Meta. Jensen said that Meta is the best recommendation engine in the world. You have some good news from NVIDIA. AI sentiment overall is improving. Then you got a stock that's still trading below 20 times earnings. I mean, there's a world in which it really can make a decent pump. Yeah, as Hollis says right there, a trial could set a precedent for future lawsuits. I mean, that's the biggest thing. Whether it's 16 billion, 20 billion, 15 billion, you needed to pay something to make sure that every state in the world and every country in the world, quite frankly, doesn't try to go after you and sue you based on the precedent that this sets. All right, NVIDIA. So this is going to be a big day. Street's expecting $95 billion of revenue, or sorry, 90 billion. Jensen's probably, I think, going to put up around 95 to 96. The whisper number is around 93. They usually beat the whisper number by about 2 billion, so that's going to be very important. In terms of NVIDIA, I think it's very simple. There is a lot of conversation around two things. One is the AI bubble. The second is the political backlash against data centers. Why do people think there's an AI bubble? Well, two things. First of all, Anthropic yesterday is expected to tell investors, as reported by the Wall Street Journal, that it sees over $30 trillion in potential revenue. Now, to give people some context about this, that is 20% of the planet's GDP. That is 100% of the United States GDP in 2025. For Anthropic to put on their S1, allegedly, that we are seeing a 30 trillion per year revenue opportunity, makes people think this is an hyperbolic statement that they are using to get people to be excited about the IPO. I've made up my mind. I'm not buying it. I don't think there's any way I can be convinced to buy the IPO. I'm not saying I will never buy Anthropic stock, but I would need a reasonable discount. I know too many VCs that are ready to dump on retail, because that's who it's going to be. It's going to be retail and a bunch of these hedge funds that are going to be hedging their positions, so they're not actually going to be long. And I don't feel comfortable with this type of explanation on where they think AI is going. I mean, this sounds a bit exuberant. It sounds a bit like we are the AI overlords, and you have to bow down to us because we're going to be consuming the entire American economy GDP. By the way, Elon also said they have a $30 trillion TAM opportunity. The difference is Elon, and as much as people hate Elon, there's a lot of people that love Elon, and SpaceX is space. It's a bit more exciting. You got the Elon premium. You're going to get people to buy that stock. For Anthropic, it's a model at the end of the day, and if that model ends up being commoditized by open source models, which there's more than enough evidence to say that's happening, not to say that's going to kill Anthropic, but that risk, along with the street putting Anthropic into a bucket of high beta semiconductor stocks, that gets people afraid about the potential of an AI bubble. Another reason people are afraid about an AI bubble is because our boy Leopold, there was an article about him, again, in the Wall Street Journal this morning, which I read every morning. And it was a 17-minute article, and the article had sources saying that people who talked to Leopold over the past 2 years while he was trying to raise money for situational awareness had intergalactic ambitions. What does that mean? That means the dude wanted to buy galaxies. You might be saying, oh, he was saying it as a joke. It was a metaphor. That's what the reporter thought. And the reporter in the article made it very clear that the sources she was talking to said, no, the guy really thought AI is going, and AGI is going to create this singularity that is going to create so much abundance, so much wealth, that he will have enough money to buy galaxies. No wonder he got liquidated, because if you think Micron's going to be a $50 trillion company, because I think that's what it would have to get to, and so would Bloom, and so would SanDisk, and so would Nebius, and all these picks and shovels would have to go to like multi-trillion-dollar valuations to even think you have enough money to be able to buy a galaxy. It obviously shows that he got a bit too close to the sun and was a bit too excited about AI, and that's just not necessarily how the stock market always works out. So I think you have those fears of like, is this a bubble. We know we see the growth. We know we see the ROI. We know we see the CapEx. And we know we see Jensen partnering with the 6 biggest financial institutions in the world to put $500 billion into all these other companies. But at the end of the day, those companies are then buying NVIDIA chips that is getting lent money to them, backstop by NVIDIA. So I think Jensen's going to have to walk a very fine line on this call to be able to make the argument that it's not a bubble and that there's real growth. There's not circular financing. I know these are arguments he's already talked about before, but now we are in a stage where the market is wondering, is this growth seriously sustainable across the entire sector? Jensen says semiconductors can 10x over the next 10 years. I think today he needs to prove it with the numbers, but he also needs to kind of hold everyone's hand while he's talking about it. And then the final thing is this data center backlash, right? He's going to need to be able to talk about Pennsylvania and New York and Texas and Florida issuing these like pseudo moratoriums on data centers. By the way, it doesn't help when one of the biggest AI companies in the world is losing multiple executives. So this morning, a sales executive from OpenAI, Peter Doolin, who left Salesforce, is going back to Salesforce, which is just weird because it's like you left Salesforce for the hottest AI company in the world, and now you're going back to Salesforce. And then you had the head of data centers, Chris Malone, yesterday leave OpenAI as well, as reported by the Wall Street Journal. So it's one of those things where it's like, okay, so you have multiple executives, multiple co-founders leaving OpenAI. You have Anthropic claiming they have this $30 trillion TAM. You already had SpaceX pump and dump aggressively. Most people are still underwater, even if they got in at 135 on SpaceX, so they're barely, up on their shares. So the IPOs haven't worked out. You're seeing a lot of hype around what's going on with the AI IPOs that are set to come. And then you've got the political backlash against data centers, which if that ends up persisting or the political party switch over the coming years and you have some real bans on data centers, which by the way, I think the Democrats also understand, hey, like this is all of our GDP growth. If we ban this stuff, it's not going to work out. But the signaling to their constituency and their base that they want to, take away the power from the rich and the elite that are building these data centers and give it back to the people. That is a good form of messaging, and that might result in some type of public policy. We're already seeing it in 4 different states, red states and blue states, as Greg Abbott in Texas and Ron DeSantis in Florida are starting to embrace this message as well. That could result in a pause or at least a slowdown in the ability to build these data centers. And if that happens, I think that is the biggest existential risk to NVIDIA because they're selling the GPUs that ultimately go into the data centers. So from that perspective, I think Jensen has a lot to show for today in terms of talking on the call. I think the numbers are going to be fantastic. I don't think the numbers really matter today because we already know the numbers are going to be good. What really matters is him being able to tell people that things are going to be okay. The world will go forward. AI will continue to generate an ROI, and NVIDIA is going to be working with a lot of these states and governments and local municipalities and towns to be able to make sure that data centers are alive. I think if he can do that, the stock can get a move. Also, the stock has dumped going into the print, right? Realistically, the stock should be closer to 230, 240. The fact that it's like at 210, 215, I think gives me a little bit more excitement that the stock can rip. The other thing is, I'll put a pump or dump poll in the chat for NVIDIA to see what people think. The other thing is their implied volatility is 5%. That's the lowest it's been in 2 years. Usually the implied volatility is 8 to 9%. So the fact that the market doesn't even think NVIDIA is going to make that big of a move, it might be a boring earnings, quite frankly, from the stock price, which I wouldn't mind because it's better than it dumping 15% the next day. But it is one of those things where a lot of people, I think, aren't buying calls that aggressively going into NVIDIA earnings because they know like it's too big of a company. And the idea that it bounces 10% might not easily happen. Although that might be the contrarian play to go long NVIDIA because now the implied volatility is low and maybe they crush it so well that everyone starts buying it up. So we're going to have to see what ends up happening, but we'll be live at 3:30 and get some bigger details on what goes on with NVIDIA. Are people excited? This is a big one. Even if you don't own NVIDIA, this is a big one, and we're going to have to see what happens. Trump just talked to a CBS reporter. A couple quotes from the president. He said something may come out of the CIA director visit to Russia. I didn't know the CIA director was visiting Russia, but apparently that's happening. He then said, I don't think Iran's leader is dead. He says, I think the Ayatollah was seriously wounded. Interesting. He doesn't think the Ayatollah that they killed is actually dead. Trump reiterates that the U.S. blockade in the Strait of Hormuz is working. That's an interesting thing to say, that he doesn't think the Ayatollah is actually... I'm not sure why he said that. Maybe he actually believes that, but there you go. Those are your quotes by Trump right now. Bitcoin at 78,000. Why is Bitcoin down? Let's talk about that real quick. I don't know. I don't think he's talking about the new Ayatollah. He's talking about the old one. Does he means his son? He might be actually talking about his son. Oh, you guys are right. He might be actually talking about his son. Well, even if he is, that's a bit confusing right there. But I you know, the quick analysis I think on that is that he's trying to kind of make the case that, like, you know, we're not engaging in military action anymore. We didn't even kill his son. He's just seriously wounded. Like, I think he's trying to boil down the tensions because, you know, over the past 2 weeks, there hasn't been the vernacular that's super aggressive. We're going to take over Kharg Island. We're going to, you know, bomb an entire nation, like he said a month ago. Like that rhetoric has died down. And now his argument is just around some type of negotiation. And then he says the Strait of Hormuz is functioning. He's probably talking about Iran and Oman's agreement today, but maybe he's trying to dampen down the level of aggression that they imposed on Iran by saying that, look, we didn't even kill his son. I don't think the Iranians are necessarily interpreting that, oh, like, thanks, you didn't, you know, but maybe they're at least trying to get to a spot that's a bit more friendly from a negotiation perspective. Bitcoin's down right now. Why is Bitcoin down? Well, oil's down and the 10 years down. Jason and I were talking about this yesterday. It is going to be fascinating if the reason Bitcoin pumped was because of the debasement trade. What is the debasement trade? It's US fiat currency being debased, which then leads to risk-on assets turning into risk-off assets like gold and Bitcoin, which historically should be risk-off assets, but they're you know, they technically turned more into risk-on assets. Because if the dollar is weakening, then you should buy things that are stronger than the dollar, which are Bitcoin. There's only 21 million of it, and then gold. But if the dollar is strengthening and yields are coming down and people are buying bonds and oil's coming down, so inflation expectations are going down, which means we might end up getting a rate cut, which should be bullish for Bitcoin and gold because they need liquidity. Not to say we're going to get a rate cut, but the probability of getting a rate hike at least goes down. If Bitcoin actually goes inverse to that and goes down, that would be fascinating because it means this entire pump would have been fake, which I don't think it is. I think the Clarity Act and a lot of that stuff is a lot more of a reason why Bitcoin's getting some love. But the fact that it fell from 81,000 to 78,000 over the past 2 days, and oil went down 7% at the same time, and bond yields came down 50 basis points. Maybe there's a little bit of an inverse relationship going on right there. It's still better than it being at 60,000, which is important. So some of your crypto derivative plays like Robinhood had a great day yesterday. That one's down in the pre-market because Bitcoin's down 109 from 112. Coinbase, MicroStrategy, BMNR, et cetera. ETH, I think we are below 2,500. We were at 2,440 right here. That's down about 1%. I mean, it's overall good for the economy if bond yields come down, but maybe the crypto assets kind of take a little bit of a breather. And we're going to see how this ends up playing out. Abercrombie & Fitch, they had a good earnings right there, 127. That's up 16%. I had a feeling they would have a good earnings. This was one of the companies that expanded operating margins by 700% 2 years ago. And obviously, it's 2 years from then, so they would have to keep up that growth. But they had some pretty good growth. I mean, overall revenue beat 1.3 billion versus 1.25 billion. They got $1.75 of their EPS aided by the tariff refund, which is now creating even more stimulus for some of these companies. So that's probably why their EPS looks really well. Operating margins are up 280 basis points year over year. The guide on EPS, Street wanted $10.72. They came in at $13.60. Again, a lot of that was given by the tariff rebound or the tariff refund. But a lot of these companies, Elf, Estee Lauder, what's the other one? Ulta, all these companies that got hit, Abercrombie, because of tariffs, Nike, they're starting to get a little bit more of a rebound based on the refund from the tariffs and also based on decent execution. Also based on the consumer that's willing to spend. I mean, the consumer was not willing to spend at Dick's yesterday as their Foot Locker brand started to show some significant signs of degrowth. But then you saw, Uber, Starbucks, Abercrombie say the consumer is fine. And so once again, it's more of a bifurcated economy as we're seeing different levels of people benefit from the consumer space and different sectors of the economy get some of that consumer momentum. Amazon right there, that's green in the pre-market. Meta, again, if you're just joining, they have settled the lawsuit with the states for $16 billion. Couple changes they have to put on their app for teenagers. Stock's up 3%. And the street likes it, which is why it's green. We've got some more quotes from Trump. He's live with Glenn Beck right now. That's where we're getting all these quotes. Trump suggests 22 ships passed through the Strait of Hormuz last night. 10 million barrels of oil left Hormuz yesterday. Beef prices are starting to come down. We're looking at regulations for beef processing plants. He says a lot of oil is pouring out of Hormuz and the Strait of Hormuz is functioning correctly. And then let me play the audio right here on what he said about the Ayatollah not being dead. Let me see if you guys can hear this. Let's pull this up right here. Okay, WhatsApp is not showing the video, but let me pull this up. That is interesting for him to actually say that. It begs the question why he's making that case. All right, here it is.
Is he dead? And where are we on the war?
I don't think he's dead. He was very seriously wounded. The left side of his body, the arm, the leg, the whole thing. He was very seriously wounded, but I don't think he's dead. And if he is, they're putting on a pretty good show because they talk about, going back to talk to him all the time, to get a final blessing on things. But, you make a deal with them. It's like it's not the most honorable.
Yeah, as Donovan says right there, he is definitely trying to de-escalate. Bitcoin right there. Look at Bitcoin fall as oil prices fall. I mean, it's a weird inverse relationship, but it's happening. Intuit took an ugly hit yesterday. Intuit included stock-based comp in their EPS guidance. I don't know why they did this when their stock is already down 50%. They actually beat earnings, guidance, revenue, EPS, all of that. But because of the stock-based comp that they included for the first time ever, I don't know what genius move that was by the CFO when the sentiment on the stock is already so bad for them to miss their numbers because of a technical accounting change. Maybe it's an opportunity down another 10%. I didn't listen to the call, so I don't know if there's any actual fundamental problems in the business, but the business seems to be growing nicely. It's now down almost 60% year to date, but that's why it fell 20% yet last night, and now it's only down 10%. Zoom also didn't have the best earnings. I mean, it beat on all metrics, but you didn't really see a lot of growth. This company bought a lot of Anthropic a couple years ago. I think that's a lot of the reason why people have been buying it, but that stock also down about down 5%. Sid, thank you for the gifted 20. Appreciate that. 20 of you guys just got gifted memberships courtesy of Mr. Sid, who has been to multiple meetups and has been watching the channel for years. Appreciate you, man. Thank you for being here. Donvin, thank you for the $20 super chat. Amazing analysis throughout the stream. Just amazing. Super duper. Amit for president. Thank you, Donvin, for that analysis. It means the world. And thank you for the super chat so I could read that analysis out to everybody from your super chat. It means a lot. All right, we got a minute. We got a minute until this market opens. Again, we have a lovely Wall Street Journal reporter here watching the show today. She's going to be documenting kind of how we do everything. I don't know if you know Hannah, but we do ring a bell at 9:30 when the market opens. So in about 45 seconds, we will be ringing the bell. There's some people in the chat that decide to mute their stream. It's honestly one of the most disrespectful things in the world. Like, they're watching the stream, they're enjoying it, and then they turn off the audio for like 20 seconds to like not hear the part where like you're supposed to, wake your ass up in the morning and really get excited. But you do have a decent amount of people that go through with it, even if they don't want to, because they know that to get somewhere in life, you got to go through the hard moments. To get the gains on these stocks, you got to go through the pain to get the gain. And we have to ring the bell. Ladies and gentlemen, it is Wednesday, August 26th, NVIDIA Day, 9:30 a.m. Refute the mute. The stock market is now open. Chad says I actually mute the stream when you're talking. You know what? That's kind of mean. That's kind of mean, Chad. But that's okay, because today is a big day. There we go. Wake your asses up. Thank you, everybody, for being here. S&P 500. We open up at 764, down about 0.3% on the day. As that goes red, NVIDIA, of course, opens red. Kind of expected NVIDIA take a little bit of a beating. Meta, this is going to be the big one. 591. 591. Can we see 600? On Mr. Meta? It's going to be really important. Again, that court case is resolved. SoFi trying to go for 19 right there. Let's see if Meta can crack through that $600 range. If it does, I think it's going to go a lot further than 600. It's just psychologically, it's got to get through some of the sellers right there. Uber, 81.20. The stock was stuck at 70 last week. Nice little 10% move since then. NVIDIA, 212. That goes red. Grab's down about 0.5%. By the way, Kramer says to sell Grab. I think maybe this is what we've been looking for, folks. I think maybe this is the moment that we've been looking for when it comes to Grab right there. Snowflake, that's down 2%. Netflix, that's down 0.5%. Zeta, that's down 1.7%. Shopify, that is also down 0.5%. How about Micron? The memory names have been losing a lot of steam recently. They have just not had that type of implied volatility that people have been attracted to. Micron right there, 930, basically flat on the day. When's the last time Micron opened down $3 only? Usually it's down, $20 or up $20 on the open. So a lot of that excitement has kind of been taken out from the memory names. And I think part of the reason is because it's consolidating the 400% gains that these stocks have year to date. SanDisk, that's down about 1%. You're not seeing that big of a move right there. Amazon, that's flat. Meta, 589. I would not want to lose the 580s right here. Even if we can close above that 590 range, that would be exciting on the day, but there's a long day to see if that can happen. Bitcoin, again, taking the beating right here based on, I think, bond yields coming down, which means Robinhood, Coinbase, MicroStrategy also taking a beating. Moderna, the stock pumped 20% yesterday. It dumped 20% the day before, down 4.73% as that one continues to get a hit. Fun Extreme, thank you for the super chat. Oracle right there is up 3%. Michael Burry shorted this thing at 147, 145, around this range. So if Oracle can actually bust through the 150s and kind of normalize there, then that short would not be working out the best. But we got to see. Oracle has been very volatile with the other data center stocks, including Nebius and Core. Nebius actually back to 220. This thing was almost going below 200 yesterday. So 220 right there is nice to see. Iren has earnings tomorrow. That's going to be a big one. Iren at 41. Oh, I bought VST yesterday. I put a long thread on X about VST. Peter Thiel bought this. David Tepper bought this. Energy seems to be the bottleneck. You look at the multiple compared to Talon Energy or Constellation Energy, which it shouldn't be valued like those companies, but it is pretty discounted. And there's reasons why it's discounted, but nonetheless, I think not only are the big guys loading up, but energy is the bottleneck. They already have deals with Meta and Amazon. They already have a partnership with NVIDIA. I would imagine that as energy continues to be the bottleneck, there's a reason we're seeing those institutional flows come into Vistra. So I took a small starter position yesterday. I've not added aggressively towards it, but it's one of those things where I want to do some more research when it comes to the energy bottleneck, because that stock is up. Bought it at around 139 yesterday, 142 right here. Palantir 170, that's down about 1.35%. I think all the software names are taking a little bit of a beating. Yup, ServiceNow down 2%. Salesforce is down 0.5%. Salesforce also has earnings today. CrowdStrike also has earnings, and CrowdStrike's going to be interesting, man. I do not think the multiple on CrowdStrike makes sense for the growth that they're putting up, but the qualitative analysis around their Mythos security concerns that are forcing everyone to invest more in cybersecurity, Moderna losing 150 right there, is super important. And so Palo Alto, CrowdStrike, either they reaccelerate growth and prove that they deserve a multiple, or on the call, they just say, look, the growth's not here yet, but the growth is absolutely coming because we're seeing more and more enterprises want to invest in security. So yeah, I don't understand how CrowdStrike can have that type of multiple with like 23% growth, but if it's important, then it'll probably hold on to that multiple. MicroStrategy right there, that's down 2%. ASST, that's down 2%. CoreWeave, 89.43, as that is also green. Meta to accrue $10 billion in legal expenses in the third quarter for the settlement with the Attorney General. So $16 billion in payouts to the states, $10 billion in legal fees. I imagine the legal fees are separate from the $16 billion. That's $26 billion. They did what, 40 billion of revenue last quarter? No, it was like 60 billion. That is a third of their revenue. Q2 revenue was 60 billion, so they're paying 25 billion of that. Wow. Yeah, that's why the stock's dropping right there, guys. That's why I tried. That's a lot of money, dude. Although this is a good thing sentiment-wise for the case, that's a lot of money, man. The good thing is the street knows about it now. It's not going to be a surprise, like Intuit, surprising everybody with new accounting laws. But yeah, that'll take it down. Dude, the 10 billion of legal expense, that's money. That could go into share buybacks. That could go into GPUs. That's going to lawyers. I mean, that's kind of aggressive. 765. It will be something they can write off, sure. It's just definitely not going to help their EPS growth. Abercrombie, wow, 27%. Do people even shop at this place anymore? Like, I haven't been to Abercrombie & Fitch in like 15 years. I think in like 7th grade, I was excited to shop there. And even then, they were overpriced. It was like $50 for like a crew neck that had their logo on it. Robinhood right there, 110.43. But I think that tax or the tariff refund is what's helping them right there. Corning, 148.42. Grab, that's down about 0.28%. Rocket Lab, 67.18. Rocket Lab getting a little bit of a move above 67. Isn't that a lot of legal expenses? Yeah, I would imagine 10 billion. I mean, last quarter, remember how much they paid? It was about 2.6. So it's 5 times or about 4.5 times the amount they paid in Q2 going into Q3 just on legal expenses to, I guess, construct and manufacture the settlements that they have with the states. I have a stop loss on the 25 Meta shares I bought last night at 569. If I get stopped out of it, then I get stopped out of it. I'm not going to be bag holding more Meta here. But I can understand why the street's selling it off. Honestly, I can understand it. I can understand. That's a lot of money. I still think if it goes back to like 540, 550, now it's an easier buy because now you know all the information and the court case is done. But I get it if short term they're going to sell it off. Reddit right there, 164. At least that is green on the day. You're getting some love right there. Iren, that's down 3. The Neocloud starting to fall. Nebius, that's down about 1%. Uber still holding on to some of its green. Meta says we are urging TikTok and YouTube to join us and state attorneys to adopt new standards to ensure teens use social media in a healthy and responsible way. I don't think Meta really cares about TikTok and YouTube making sure teens use social media in a healthy way. I think Meta's like, bro, if we're going down, if we have to put limits on how many hours these kids can spend on our app, if we have to make sure by 9 p.m. that we tuck them in bed and they can't actually, look at Instagram anymore, that, Meta is going to mess up a lot of kids that are, on Instagram late at night trying to have conversations. I mean, Instagram basically is the new Tinder, right? Instagram is where a lot of kids meet each other for dating. Those conversations at 9 p.m., it's over. Like, you better take your ass to sleep. I think Meta's like, hey, TikTok and YouTube, you got to do the same thing. You got to do the same shit. We are not going to be the only ones. Like, really? You're going to be able to watch a YouTube video at 10 p.m., but you can't text that girl back that you're talking to on Instagram? Like, it's one of those things where it makes sense from their perspective. Like, because if you're not on Meta, guess what? You might go on YouTube. You might go on TikTok. By the way, TikTok also has DMs. TikTok also has direct messaging. So, I mean, kids might just shift their attention right there. And that also would create a headwind for Meta. American Airlines. I also bought some American Airlines yesterday at $13.77 based on the idea of oil coming down. I think this thing gets back up to $16.50 if we see crude around that 73, 74 range. So holding on to those 1,000 shares I bought yesterday. And we're going to see if it gets back there. Doug says, I sleep to YouTube videos. So do I. I usually have some type of political or sports commentary or debate playing in the background, and that's how I fall asleep. But I guess kids are going to have to go to sleep without any of this stuff. You better take your ass to sleep. Yeah, dude. I mean, Meta's acting like the parents now. At 9 p.m., you're going to get a notification saying, hey, go to bed. Get off Instagram. Epsilon, that's down 2%. That was up a lot yesterday on those insider buys, as that's been continuing to get some more love. Also, Snapchat. Yeah, I mean, Snapchat is another place where I don't use this app anymore, down 6% right here, but a lot of kids use this app every day. And direct messaging on Snapchat is like kind of the core feature of the product. So I would imagine Meta wants them to deal with that. All right, I think I got stopped out of Meta. 566. Did I get stopped out? I got stopped out. Okay, we made $50 on that Meta buy from last night. 565, as that is down 1%. It makes sense, dude. It makes sense at the end of the day. As oil continues to take a little hit, Moderna at 149. That's a lot of expenses. 80.50. We're 50 cents away from losing 80 on these oil prices. USAR over 20. That's getting some love. $20. That's up 5%. Chad says, just put your kid's phone up at 9 p.m. It's called parenting. I will say, my parents did not take away my phone when I was younger. And I mean, they probably should have, because I probably stayed up too many nights, but they kind of trusted me with the phone. But I still stay, it's what happens. Like, you stay up late, you're on your phone. Like, it's definitely not the healthiest for teenagers. They should be going to bed and getting ready for school. But again, that might be more up to the parents than Meta. So now it's going to be baked into the platform at 9 p.m. that everything shuts down. And if that's happening for Meta, that should happen for every other app. I mean, honestly, that should not be exclusive to Meta right there. 81.14 on Uber, as that is still up 1%. NVIDIA going down. Of course, NVIDIA is going down. 212. That's down 0.5%. As the rest of these names are also still getting it. It's not the healthiest for adults either. That's true. But see, adults are adults for a reason, right? You can pay taxes. You can go to jail. Like, there's something that comes with being an adult. We have more sympathy for children. As a shareholder, look, I don't think the state should be forcing Meta to impose these limits. But if that's what they have to do, I just think it should be universal. If Meta has to do it, there's no reason TikTok and Instagram, which is owned by Meta, or Snapchat or YouTube can't do it either. Like, why does YouTube get a free pass? Why does TikTok get a free pass? TikTok, one could argue, is more addicting than Meta. The types of content that shows up on TikTok, their algo is a whole different world, right? Like, I mean, If it's happening to Meta, it should be happening to everybody else. Amazon 259, that goes red. Accenture, that's down 2%. Then Robin at 109.20. That's also going red. Interesting. All right. So you've got a decent chunk of names that flipped red. These Trump comments. Bloom's at 223. This one got to 185 a couple days ago. So at least the energy name's getting some more love as Bloom is seeing it. Meta just put out a, wow, they call it an open letter to TikTok and YouTube to join us in supporting teens. Meta outlined a 2-hour daily limit and prompting teens every 15 minutes of continuous screen times. Meta argued cross-platform adoption is necessary because teens restricted on one service may shift to another platform. The proposal would turn off access to Meta apps at night by default and stop notifications during school hours. They wrote a whole blog about this right now. Google's down on this news. I would imagine ByteDance, if it was public, would be a little red as well. Reddit also, yeah, I mean, that should apply to Reddit technically too, right? There's a lot of kids that use Reddit. Reddit has like, what, 130 million daily active uniques. I would imagine, I don't know, at least 10, 20% of them are teenagers. Like that could also be causing a headwind for them as Reddit goes red. That's crazy, dude. We thought the settlement was bullish, and then you actually get the details, and this settlement comes with a lot more restrictions. Vistra right there up 3%, which can be managed, but at the end of the day, it's probably still annoying. Nvidia still moving sideways. American Airlines at 1409. Oracle loses 150 as that continues to go down. Palantir, are we losing 170? We have not lost 170 in about 2 weeks. So the fact that it's holding that 40% move from earnings, I think it's actually good. AK Media is addicting and should also pay a settlement. The good thing is you guys get the freedom to decide if you want to watch AK Media. Or I guess these kids are compulsed and manipulated through Meta's algorithms to stay on the platform. I mean, look, if that's what the courts are ruling here, then every platform has to abide by that. It just doesn't make sense to single out Meta right there. Uber, 80.98. Figma also getting hit by 2%. And then Microsoft trying to go for 500 as Microsoft is still getting hit at 494. At least it's up from 486 yesterday. Interesting. It's a pretty crazy way to start off this morning going into NVIDIA. You still have some of these Trump quotes coming out on Canada. Trump says they don't have anything we don't want to have. We can get by without Canada. It's time to teach Canada you can't do this anymore. So you have this continued hostility coming from both sides on a trade war. Canada, by the way, for those that missed it, increased their tariffs yesterday by 50% on steel for the United States. So you do have some tariffs going back and forth. And, you know, given inflation is still a little ugly, tariffs increasing does not help inflation. Oil right there, almost at 81. It's up from 80.5. And I think there's going to be some continued back and forth between the U.S. and Canada. That's true. We did tariff hockey sticks by 50%. I forgot we did that. I don't know if that's going to solve all of our concerns, though, with Canada. Intuit, is it back to normal? Okay, Intuit's basically back to normal. This was really weird last night for it to fall 20% and then still be down 10% pre-market off an accounting change. But I did not think Intuit deserved to be down that much. I don't have a position in this, but you know, you don't want to see the software names get hit that badly because then it goes back to this narrative of Claude that's going to be taking over the software names, and you know, the algos start selling off the rest of these software stocks. So it makes sense Intuit's getting some of that recovery, as that one is now 2%. Ask Hannah if she's ever heard Bohemian Rhapsody. I already asked that question an hour ago, and her answer was, yeah, of course I've heard it. And you know, that's good. Everyone should hear that song. It's a good song. I just happened to discover it at 28 years old. I don't know what you guys want me to do. 213.50 on NVIDIA, as that is trying to flip up a little bit. How long until they put a 2-hour limit on Robinhood? It's a great question. Granted, adults are using Robinhood, not kids. But that would be kind of funny if like Robinhood. Imagine you're in a trade. You're like trying to sell. Robin's like, you've reached your time limit for the day. I'd be like, yeah, I don't think I'm using Robinhood anymore. Like you just can't have that stuff happen in the real world. But I guess for kids, it's a totally different mentality. Meta right there, 565. If this loses 560, that would be quite incredible. Uber, 80.6. As that continues to go green. Bloom, still up 4%. Intel also down right here. This one has been kind of stuck over the past couple of days. CEO bought 100,000 shares at 95. You have Jensen and the White House obviously still in this thing. They were oversubscribed on the raise that they were doing for their new foundry by 20x. So it's been stuck with the rest of the semis, but you've had Bloom, which is kind of in that semi bucket, breakout as I think the energy names. That's probably why Vistra's up today. Probably CEG is up today. Constellation, yep, that's up. Talon, we were talking about that last night with Jason. That's up. So all your energy names actually getting a little bit more love. Roblox is another big one. I mean, talk about kids being on a platform. Roblox is definitely one of those. They have like 150 million kids every day that use the platform. So that would be another one that we might have to think about with advanced regulation. Akamai, that's up a little bit. Some of your CDNs getting some love. Zeta, 2793. Shopify, that's down 1.6. And then Snowflake, that's also down 1%. SoFi, 19. We just closed below 19. Wow, okay, an actual move above 19. SoFi has tested 19 3 times this year, and we haven't been able to break through. I would hope that this time is a shot that we can. This is not fair to most kids because most of them use Instagram to socialize. I mean, look, that's been the argument from a lot of the parents, right? Which is that our kids need to socialize, which is why we give them these apps. And like at the end of the day, you know, parents don't want kids to be isolated from their friend groups because, like, you know, kids that are lonely, it's, you know, there's a lot more worse consequences for them versus kids that are more social. I think every parent wants their kid to be a bit more social. And you need to be on social media to do that. It's just, you also have a cohort of parents that are saying we gave kids the ability to be on Instagram and then things went haywire. And the ultimate result is this resolution that ends up being a $26 billion fine for Meta. Abercrombie and Fitch, 30%. Goodness gracious. As that continues to go green. AMD has been stuck below 500 for a while. 490 right there. As that's trying to get back to 500. What do you think about SanDisk right here? I think all these memory names are going to need a lot of euphoria to get back to their all-time highs. Like, once again, their gross margins, I don't think they've peaked, but how much further can they go, right? I mean, if NVIDIA is going to show some gross margin decline today, and part of the reason NVIDIA is increasing their pricing into Q3 by 15% is because of the memory pressure on DRAM, then once again, Apple's doing the same with consumer electronics. I think the market's just like, okay, like, how long is that pricing pressure going to last? Still, the multiple is too cheap given the level of growth that they're putting up and the EPS they're putting up and the buyback. So, like, that's the fundamental case for the memory names. But, you know, to break out for SanDisk to get back to 2,300, I just think you need a lot of excitement. And a lot of that leverage left the system already. So that excitement might not come back that easily. That's crazy that Meta's going to pay $10 billion for lawyers. Looks like that's what they're going to have to do to get out of this. OpenAI's AI chip brings a new threat to NVIDIA margins as custom silicon gains ground. So this is what we didn't talk about too much today, this jalapeno chip by OpenAI. Sam Altman tweeted yesterday that we made a new chip and it's really fast. I think you've got Jensen that's obviously not the happiest about this, which is why he's been pushing open source to compete with the model companies that are now competing with him. This is the head of OpenAI's chip business yesterday on Bloomberg talking about their new chip.
But it's a really good chip. It should drop it by a lot. Like, you know, the performance per watt that we're seeing, which is a good proxy for how much token will cost, is somewhere in the region between 1.8 to 4x better than other existing chips right now. And so we should see that ultimately when this rolls out into production, customer token prices should come down. That's a big drive that we've had at OpenAI for a little while now. And this really is part of that strategy. And again, it goes back to attacking not only the software, but attacking all the way down into the hardware and even into the data centers as well.
I mean, I think Jensen hears that and he's probably annoyed because he doesn't want more competition. He's got Amazon breathing down his neck. He's got Google with the TPUs. He's got Meta that's working on their own chip with Broadcom as well. He's got Anthropic, that has a custom agreement with Broadcom and Micron to secure supply to build their own custom silicon. He has OpenAI building their own chips. He has Microsoft, that's been rumored on working on their MAIA chip, even though it hasn't come out in like a year, but they're working on it in the background. Like, it's one of those things where at some point the street's going to wake up and be like, okay, NVIDIA, can you really keep these margins? Can you really keep up this growth? And obviously they're not going to grow 100% every quarter for the next 5 years, but like, people don't love when growth slows down, even if they know that growth's going to slow down. And that might be part of the narrative today, not because the growth is going to slow down, but because of the future expectations of that growth potentially slowing down, even if it's still a monumental level of growth. That could potentially make some people upset. Abercrombie & Fitch up 30% right there. NVIDIA, is that still flat? Some more stuff on this Meta news. 5.3 billion. Oh, wow. Meta's being strategic of this. 5.3 billion of the settlement will be released only if YouTube and TikTok each pay matching amounts and implement limits. Remaining 30% will only be released. So that is 5.3 out of the, the 5.3 billion out of the 16.8 billion is contingent on the Googs and TikTok matching it. There's no way they're serious about matching it. If I'm Google, there's no way in hell I'm going to pay $5 billion for no reason. Maybe I implement the limit. Maybe. And that's a big maybe too, because like they're suing your ass, man. If I'm Sundar, I'm like, Zucks, you're getting sued, not me. Like, YouTube is filled with documentaries and informational content. Like, if I was Sundar, I'd be like, YouTube's actually really important for kids, long form content. There's important information. Facebook is just junk on Instagram that makes you addicted to an algorithm that doesn't do any good for you. Like, if I was YouTube, I would be able to. Now, if I'm TikTok, I don't think I have an argument. But if I'm YouTube, I could definitely defend YouTube versus Facebook. And I'm absolutely not going to pay $5 billion because Zucks is holding it hostage. Google right there, down about 1%. Yeah, Sundar should bring me on the next earnings call. Be like, look, we have this guy on YouTube, talks about finance. This is entertaining content. This is content that's important for the platform. This is not the same type of nonsense you see on Instagram Reels. Like, I saw an Instagram Reel yesterday of someone sleeping and someone just took a bucket of water and they just splashed it on him. And now my algo is more of these, like, and I'm just like, sometimes I ask myself, like, what am I doing, bro? Like, why am I watching? But it's hilarious because it's like someone's in deep sleep and then you just throw a bucket of water on them. It's like funny. But like, you don't get that on YouTube. On YouTube, you get, informational stuff. That is crazy. Meta's really throwing the gauntlet at it here. Robinhood 110, Amazon down about 0.5%. That's on YouTube as well. Maybe on YouTube Shorts. Well, that's fair. YouTube Shorts is probably the same nonsense as Instagram. But the point is, if I'm Google, there's no way I give up billions of dollars just because of Meta's issues that they're having. Like, if you're going to sue me for $5 billion, you have to sue me. If you're suing Meta, you're suing Meta. It is what it is. And quite frankly, if the people that agreed to this lawsuit are agreeing to this stipulation that they're only going to get 33% of the 16.68 billion if YouTube and TikTok agree to it, then if they still get the other 70% of it, then it is what it is, right? They're still getting billions of dollars. And maybe it's a Hail Mary on if Google and TikTok also agree. Chad says they've obviously never watched your chat. Okay. You know what, Chad? It's your roasting of me in the chat that is what makes it makes the chat entertaining, but it also makes the chat not as educational as it should be. So it's technically your fault if YouTube is going to have to pay this $5 billion. CRML, that was up 17% yesterday. Is that still up 17%? That's up 3% today, compounding from that 17% that it had yesterday. Goodness gracious, dude. This is kind of crazy. P-Lab also had earnings. This stock up 5%. It was at 38. Now it's at 30.96. So that's down a little bit, but they did beat on the top and the bottom as that continues to get green, or it continues to go a little bit red, but still up 5.6% on the day. I don't think we've ever seen a story like this with a lawsuit involving a big tech company. Meta trying to fight back right here. But this is what we're seeing right now. YouTube needs to push YouTube Kids based on account. That's true. YouTube does have YouTube Kids. That's fair. I mean, they do. Every time I upload a video, they say, is this made for kids or not? So like that is also true. There have been some safeguards that have been put in place already. Shopify, that is down 1% as well. Why is Iran dumping? Well, all the neoclouds taking a little bit of a hit. And so I think you're seeing some of the pain right there. I mean, honestly, all of these companies I think are going to be stuck until NVIDIA reports and NVIDIA puts up some really good earnings. And even if they do, if they dump the next day, dude, we're going to have an ugly couple of days if we dump on NVIDIA because everything's going to dump with it. Rocket Lab, all the high beta names are just going to fall with it. Broadcom, which should be up today based on this OpenAI chip because they're working with Broadcom. This is so weird that Broadcom's down here. But I do like that NVIDIA is kind of dumping into the print. Micron getting up to 940 at least. And the expectations are probably lower than not to get this thing making a move. He got liquidity swept on Meta, probably did. But again, it's obviously something the street's going to have to grapple with. $26 billion. Well, technically 21 because 5 of the billion is now contingent on TikTok and Google agreeing. That is interesting, dude. That is very interesting. I would imagine Zucks will be doing some interviews soon and we'll kind of see his perspective and see what he says. Well, yeah, as Daniel says, if I go down, I'm taking everyone down with me. FME, thank you for the super chat. Amit, your funny jokes help me get through my day. I appreciate you. That means a lot. Thank you for saying that here today. Meta's a snitch. Oh my gosh. No, but it makes sense, right? If you're Meta, you're like, hold on, we're not the only ones playing the social media game. Like maybe we played it better than everybody else, which is why we're in trouble, but everyone else is also playing this game with us. Zeta 28, App Lovin at 311 right here. Again, for those just joining, the PCE data that we got was actually not that bad. 3.7 versus 3.6. That's really the only headline number that matters. S&P now flipping green. Let's see if we can get to 768 here. But I think the bigger headline will be NVIDIA today, and obviously all this Meta news. It's probably bigger stuff. Okay, someone just bought 1 million of Tesla calls, 350, September 2nd. Tesla's been weirdly pumping every day and then dumping the day after. It was at 365 on Monday. But you are seeing some of that option premium come into Tessie and getting it a little bit more love. Yeah, Core was at 3.3. That's fair on PCE. Headline was 3.7. I think the expectation was 3.4. So it did come in a little bit lower. Well, a little bit higher than expected, but not as high as the street wanted for it to be. GEV, the energy names. The energy names are really getting some love today. GEV, Vistra, CEG. I'll have some more DD on Vistra soon, but I mean, looking at the multiples last night, I don't know if it deserves to trade at only 8 times EBITDA, given where the sector trades. That Constellation right there, that's up 1% as well. Lemonade's at 55. This one got hit as well. It was at $100. It was almost at like $99 a couple months ago. There's been a lot of these high beta names that had their love in January. Some of these names in January just exploded. The drone stocks, the eVTOL stocks, small caps kind of went hardcore, and then you had the semis really take over much of the attention over the next 4 months. And now it's software and fintech and crypto, and the semis are starting to normalize. IGV, that's up a little bit. SMH, that's basically flat on the day. Navitas, that's up 2.69% after a good move that they had yesterday. Has Hannah heard you sing Bohemian Rhapsody yet? She's not heard me sing it. It's not going to happen today. But, I have sang it to myself plenty of times since discovering. Dude, I've watched the Freddie Mercury live at Aid concerts in 1985, like I think 100 times. Like I've literally just watched him sing that song on the piano so many times in the past week. Take-Two, they just put out a statement from Rockstar Games. That's up 1.6%. They apologized after the Grand Theft Auto 6 gameplay video was leaked and said the unauthorized footage was not how it intended to reveal the game. Okay, so that was a real leak. That wasn't AI. That some people were thinking. November 19th is still going to have the launch. I am so surprised this stock has not run further based on all the hype around this game. I know they've been announcing it for 5 years and the stock is up over the past 5 years, but if you do some basic math on this, if the game sells the 50 million copies that they should be selling, they're going to make a lot of money. That's probably not factored into their EPS estimates, or at least not factored into the multiple on EPS that it's getting right now. The studio will publish an extended official look at the game tomorrow. Wow, okay, that's official. Rockstar said the game is nearly finished while acknowledging that official details and gameplay took longer to prepare than planned. The company said the leaked material could affect the intended experience, but encouraged players to wait for the official release. Okay. There you go. Take 2. That is what we got. Netflix is also going to be having some of that content released soon. Netflix 8151, Netflix and Uber kind of both breaking out as well, as that's been getting a bit of love. BMNR 2507 back above 25, as that's been getting some love. ETH's also been ramping up a bit more along with BTC, even though the bond yields have come down. The Qatari Prime Minister is going to be visiting Tehran in a bid to reduce regional tensions soon. This is actually bullish. You got Tehran, Qatar, Pakistan, and the Egyptians now all working together, at least with their foreign ministry, to try to create some level of a plan. This article says the Saudis could be involved as well to get things in motion. Meta right there, 574, breaking back above 570. Interesting. Very interesting morning as we head into Nvidia earnings. What did you guys say on the poll? I would imagine the majority of you said pump versus dump right here. Tesla denies rumor it's abandoning its full self-driving push in China. Tesla China denied reports today that it withdrawn its full self-driving team or vacated its Shanghai data center, saying the facility remains operational and hiring for driver assistance roles is accelerating. 67% of you said pump on Mr. Nvidia. Again, we'll be live at 3:30. I think maybe some of the Tesla hype last week was also the deliveries in China, which were a bit better than expected. The problem is, once again, if SpaceX is actually going to buy Tesla, they do have to kind of get rid of this China business. I mean, or at least have it as a complete separate entity, because SpaceX is a defense contractor. There's no way the FCC would be okay with having a company like that exposed to the Chinese as aggressively as Tesla is. 25% of their sales are from China. Palantir back to 173. Apple at 312, getting some love here as well. So I feel like the China breakup is inevitably going to happen, but it's going to take some time for it to play through. Nvidia, 255 calls, getting 1.2 million of flow. 1016. 1016 strike is what you're seeing on Mr. Nvidia. And there you go. Bloom still up 3% as well. As that's not stopping either. Why is Walmart selling off today? You know, that's actually interesting because some of the high beta names are down, so you would think Walmart gets a bit, but Dick's is up 3%. I don't think Walmart easily gets the rebound on a day where high beta goes down because, you know, they said the consumer's struggling. Like that's an issue that the street's going to want at least another quarter of data on before they think that the management at Walmart can accurately navigate a struggling consumer. Now, again, labor market's not bad. Labor market data has not been bad for a year. Marvell 242. Oh, wait. On Friday, we're going to get the labor market revisions. We're not getting it today. That's also going to be super important because last year, this is an annual revision that happens every year in August. We lost 911,000 jobs. So like basically 1 million jobs. There was no growth because all of it was taken away. If that happens again, I wonder if the market actually likes it because that means we're more likely for a rate cut. Because right now, part of the reason we're not cutting rates is because the Fed is like, hey, the labor market's great. Inflation's the issue. We have to hike rates. If inflation becomes less of an issue because oil comes down because the war ends and you get bond yields coming down, and then the labor market starts to create a bit of an issue, which is bad for the stock market because earnings growth might suffer in that case. But if the majority of the stock market is based on capex, not the consumer, which is crazy to say, but that's kind of what's happening, then maybe the stock market survives even if the labor market goes down and the Fed ends up cutting rates because they're afraid about unemployment, which would be good for the stock market because you would have a lower cost of capital. Like that could be a really nice way that we pump into the end of the year post midterms, Palantir 174, along with earnings growth being as good as it is, right? Which has been the story this whole year. But we got to see if we actually get that. We got to see if we actually get it to play out this way. It's crazy that you were celebrating unemployment. It's not celebrating it, but effectively it kind of is if you're a stock market investor. Like I came to grips with this 3 years ago when I realized that's how the market works. This was 2023. Because we needed inflation to come down, right? Inflation was at like, I think 5.5% beginning of 2023. Like for those that were here on the streams, we would be hoping for like a bad labor market report because we knew the market would interpret that as less inflationary. And it's the sad truth, but it's also the nature of economics. It's like in order to have inflation come down, you technically need less people spending. To have less people spending, you need the labor market to at least struggle. You know, obviously don't want it to, be horrific in the short term to get rates to come down. And ironically, rates coming down would actually help the majority of people, regardless of the labor market, because then the cost of financing a car or a house, I mean, that the housing market has been stuck simply because of these rates being the way they're at. Mortgage rates came in this morning at 7.2%. I mean, it's the highest we've had in freaking 3 years. Like it's getting kind of stupid now. You're going to need something to bring this down. And maybe that's the labor market. Having said that, I don't think we're actually going to report losing 1 million jobs. I don't think Trump would be happy about that. I don't know if the BLS will easily show that. But if we added like 10 million jobs, there's no reason to cut rates, right? Now, granted, the stock market has done very well in the face of not cutting rates. SPY's up 14% this year. So still, you don't technically need the rate cut. It's just you definitely don't need the rate hike. And I think that's the big thing that we need to see not happening. Uber loses 80 as that goes red, 79.94. And that is down. Why does Bill Gates want to meet with Xi Jinping? That's an interesting question. I read this article this morning as well in the Wall Street Journal. The title was 3 takeaways from Bill Gates' 5,784 word warning on AI. Basically, he talks about wanting to meet with the Chinese in the article. He talks about different tax proposals. He talks about job displacement. And his goal in the article is to say that the US and the Chinese need to work together on what's going on with AI. But it just, it's one of those things where it's just like him making an active plea to say, I'm going to go to China. I want to talk to the CCP and I want to figure out how we're going to navigate AI together. I don't know if the Darios or the Sam Altmans feel the same as Bill Gates feels because they are afraid of the Chinese and they want to beat the Chinese. And they want to have better models than the Chinese. So cooperation is probably important, but it is an absolute arms race. And whoever wins in AI is going to dictate their values on the world from a military perspective and from a business perspective. I mean, it's one of those things where it's like if China won the internet back in the dot-com bubble and all of us were using Baidu instead of Google, what would the world have looked like? Because once you get the users and your multi-billion person platform, you win, right? The only reason Facebook and Google are not in China is because China banned them. I don't know if the US would have banned Chinese platform. We technically don't do that, right? There's plenty of China influence in the United States, but we have banned Chinese social media, and then would there have been excessive amounts of censorship and lack of freedom of speech? And I'm not saying the US social media platforms are perfect either, right? But the point is, do we want China to win when it comes to AI? I think it's a big question that politicians are going to have to navigate with. BMNR right there, $24.99 as that continues to go. Yeah, TikTok, perfect example. Obviously, that's a Chinese platform that is infiltrated into the United States. For all the crap Biden and Trump both gave to TikTok about we're going to ban it, it obviously never got banned because guess what? There's a ton of U.S. investors that have money in ByteDance, and if TikTok loses America, they lose a chunk of their high ARPU audience. Right? There's not a lot of people around the world that can actually pay when they see all these ads. So the average revenue per user is massive in the United States. And now TikTok has influence in the United States, and China controlled the algorithm for a few years until Oracle and Microsoft took over parts of it, which is still unsure exactly who has control over the algorithm. So do we want that to happen in AI? I think is a big question. CrowdStrike right there, 188. as that continues to go green. Yeah, Oracle never got that much love from owning TikTok, to be honest. Never got that much love, at least in terms of their stock price. It really was the data center stuff that got the market to be more excited. Let's get a little bit of coverage on some of the Meta stuff that we're seeing right here. As again, that was the big story of the day. $26 billion, 16 in the settlement and 10 in the legal fees that Meta is paying to resolve this lawsuit.
Too, saying in part because, quote, teens move fluidly across dozens of apps. We need an industry-wide solution. We therefore call on our industry peers, TikTok and YouTube, to implement this new framework right away. Stock did initially jump on that news before pulling back. And joining us on the phone this morning is former Assistant Attorney General Jonathan Kanter. Jonathan, it's great to have you. Appreciate the insight, especially here on Deadline. Thoughts about the settlement relative to what some of the expectations were?
Yeah, so my initial thoughts are that the state attorneys general achieved what Congress thus far has been unable to do, which is to actually regulate social media. For years, we've been talking about it. Congress has expressed a desire to do it, but hasn't been able to achieve it. This settlement, of course, the numbers are big, and obviously when you're talking about this kind of this magnitude of damages, that's quite substantial from a market perspective. But what's most significant about this settlement is the fact that it imposes significant regulatory changes in terms of how it uses data relating to children, how it age gates, how it throttles the usage for kids, shuts off during school hours, and a whole range of remedies that really do look a lot more like a regulatory scheme for social media, one that most of the country has been asking for years, if not longer. And so while this is certainly not done, there are more cases in the queue, municipal cases and private cases. This is by far and away the most significant step forward in social media regulation that we've seen in the history of the product.
Yeah, some of these measures are interesting. Age assurance measures, responding to reports of potentially harmful content within 6 hours. It's interesting, a non-personalized feed for users under 18. You think those have teeth?
Well, we'll see. I think the devil's going to be in the details. We're going to have to, unpack this settlement. I think the biggest question in any of these settlements is compliance. Right, so it's very easy to come up with these general terms, but these are not static products. They're dynamic and they're growing. And so I know there are some what appear to be robust oversight, independent monitoring provisions. The extent to which those provisions and those monitoring officials are put in place, vigilant, and can adapt to changes will be where the rubber meets the road. And
so the thing is, this lawsuit, I mean, based on how he's talking about it, is going to happen in phases as the market is continuing to take a little bit of a dump right here. Kind of everything is going to get right now. And it's not going to happen overnight, the payment, definitely not with this contingency that Meta's put on YouTube and TikTok. But also the actual implementation of these changes is going to be very interesting because how does it happen? When does it happen? Does it go into effect next year? Does it go into effect 2 weeks from now? Does Meta have to actually build some sophisticated stuff to make this officially play through? Palantir at their 175, Intel getting wrecked 86, or is this something that is rather quick and then the street can kind of interpret because the street needs, look, if they're going to have these wide sweeping changes around blocking limits and at night you have to go to sleep, you can't use Instagram, etc. Does that affect earnings? I think is the big question for all of us. Because if it doesn't affect earnings, who cares, right? Okay, the teenagers have to go to sleep at 9 p.m. They can't use Instagram. That's fine. As long as it's not affecting the earnings growth of Meta, from a stock perspective, the street doesn't really need to stress about it. But if it starts to, dabble into that territory of hey, we're actually seeing earnings go down because engagement's down 10% or something like that, then you're going to need at least 6 months of that data, 2 quarters. Which could mean Meta is stuck, if that's also part of the confusion the street's going to have. Broadcom continuing to sell off right here. Just weird, man, that Broadcom selling off 352 even after that OpenAI news yesterday. The reason Broadcom could be down, we talked about this yesterday. $70 billion of debt they're offering. That's it's not really a headwind, but it's like an issue because, there is more debt that's levering up their balance sheet, even though it's not necessarily a strain on the stock. And then number two is part of the reason they could be down is because of the Oracle chip, or not the Oracle, the OpenAI chip news, because no one likes OpenAI, right? Like OpenAI can't do an IPO because I don't think they feel like they have the growth to be able to juice up the numbers like Anthropic does. Number two, you have all these executives leaving OpenAI. So that's already bad sentiment. And then number three, Broadcom has not shown OpenAI revenue ever. And they're basically guiding in 2027 for maybe you're going to see it, maybe you're not going to see it. Now, based on this new Jalapeno chip, I would imagine you're going to start to see some meaningful OpenAI revenue. But if that revenue is inconsequential or delayed, and there's already this negative sentiment around OpenAI, Broadcom as an OpenAI proxy, Oracle as an OpenAI proxy, it's been stuck all year, could be part of the reason why it's down more so than the tailwind for why it should be gaining ground. Although if SemiAnalysis is right, and that chip is simply better than NVIDIA's Blackwell at very specific tasks when it comes for inference and general training purposes, Broadcom's going to sell a lot of those chips. And that should be relatively bullish. So we're going to have to see. Yeah, they have earnings in September. That's true. Are kids really driving the ad revenue? That's a fair point. I don't think they are. A lot of kids, when they see ads on Instagram, they can't even buy or pay for that stuff because they don't have money, right? It's kind of like this is why Snapchat, which is majority teenagers, has never been able to really make a profit. So that's a good point. That really shouldn't affect the monetization of the app. Maybe it reduces engagement here and there, but if it doesn't affect monetization, I think it's more so Meta wanting to make sure these kids are going to be using Instagram and Facebook and WhatsApp when they turn into adults, which, if you're 14 years old, it's a couple of, 4 or 5 more years until you want to be like, I started using Facebook in 2009, and I probably couldn't buy anything off the ads that I saw, but I probably downloaded some games or some random, like stuff that I could do as a kid. And I'm still using Instagram to this day, 15 years later. So I've been hooked on their products for a long time. What was the big game? Farmville was the big game back in 2009, 2010 that took off on Facebook. And so I think that's why they want them to be integrated. Microsoft 495, Tesla trying to get 350, Micron goes red, Robinhood 110. That's also flat. What's your take on Amkor? Amkor is in the bucket of semiconductor names. Advanced packaging is super important, but at the end of the day, like Amkor is going to trade with Intel and Bloom and SanDisk. Like I think all these names are just in one bucket, which is SMH. And it quite frankly, NVIDIA has mentioned Amkor multiple. Jensen has personally mentioned Amkor multiple times when it comes to advanced packaging. Like it's a very important company trading at an incredibly reasonable multiple. But the hype has died down on the multiple expansion across the entire semi sector, which is why Amkor has been, basically stuck. NVIDIA is still down 1%. Corning's been in the same situation. Jason talked about it yesterday. It's been stuck with the optics names. Lumentum and Coherent had good earnings, but Marvell really got most of the shine. Coherent now below 300. It was above 350 last week. Marvell, with the Google news about buying 7% of the company, I think that's what took a lot of the excitement from the optics space and took it into the Marvells of the world. Dense, thank you for the super chat. Appreciate it. Amit, you are not only great with your analysis and explanations, you are the funniest YouTube ever. Thank you. I appreciate it, Dense. Thank you for the super chat. I should just tell you guys every day. I have a Wall Street Journal reporter watch. This is the most amount of love they're usually not this nice. Like this is a different level of glazing that we're seeing here, which I appreciate. Deeply appreciate. TJ, thank you for the super chat. Welcome to the team, Hannah. Will you see it at the next meetup? Hannah was actually supposed to be at the New York meetup, but something came up. So hopefully next year we'll get her at one of the meetups.
I'll be at Hood Summit.
She'll be at Hood Summit. Okay. I think I'll be at Hood Summit. That's in mid-September. So if I'm there in Houston, and if you guys are there, then you'll be able to see her. Meta 567. That is also continuing to go red. Yeah, 60% of you voted pump on NVIDIA going up. Put in the chat if you own NVIDIA. I think it's like, just put like a yes. I think it's like 70% of us. If you own the S&P, you own NVIDIA. Basically, if you own anything semiconductor related, you're directionally owning NVIDIA because most of those companies, their biggest customers probably NVIDIA, whether it's Marvell or Lumentum or Coherent or SpaceX, you know, Micron, SanDisk, obviously. Like it just affects everything. I don't know if there's ever been a company this important with this much liquidity, with this much retail attention in the history of the stock market. I mean, Jensen is responsible for everything that we're seeing here. If you own Google and Amazon, I mean, technically NVIDIA is going to have an impact. It might not be as directional as if you own some of the semiconductor names, but NVIDIA's arguments around demand, their concentration of customers. Also, remember, NVIDIA is now breaking down revenue from hyperscalers. And I forgot, does anyone remember? It's like platform revenue and then something else. But last quarter was the first quarter they broke down how much they're getting from the hyperscalers versus how much they're getting from everybody else, which is basically the neoclouds. And so that, I think the growth in that the street's going to want to see as that continues to, expand in a more meaningful way. I forgot what they called it. It's like two different forms of revenue they're now breaking out. SPY going flat again on the day 765 as that is read. Any news to why we lost the morning pump? I would just imagine it's, well, first of all, this Meta, like the details on the Meta lawsuit coming out and how much they're paying for the legal fees, I think that just took the wind out of Meta. And that probably hurt Reddit and AppLovin and all the advertising stocks, Google. Now Meta's challenging them to pay $5 billion. Like that's an issue. So that probably hurt the Max 7. In general, I think as NVIDIA officially loses 1% today is part of the reason we lost the entire morning pump, as NVIDIA has done this pretty much every time the day of earnings. It usually pumps the week going into earnings, then a few hours before it takes a little bit of a breather. And then as of recently, NVIDIA dumps the day after. This time, NVIDIA is dumping going into the earnings, kind of going down a little bit before the earnings, a couple hours before. And now, maybe that's the setup for the pump. But I think that's why everything else is also taking a bit of a dip. Also, oil spiked up a little bit from the highs. We're at 81.50 now. We were almost below 80. So that could create a little bit of pain. Broadcom credit risk measures rose in August as the company considers additional guarantees and financing support for large AI chip transactions tied to Anthropic and other customers. That's probably your headline for why Broadcom's down today. Now, granted, that's part of the reason why they're financing $60 to $70 billion in debt. So that's not really a new headline. Like they're doing that so that they can make sure that their biggest customers have the money to pay for this. That's also part of the reason why Anthropic is going public, because they need the money to pay for these chips. I just don't want to participate in giving Anthropic that money during the IPO, because someone is going to be selling those shares they bought a long time ago. Granted, if the public doesn't do it, Jensen's going to do it. I mean, like, as much as Jensen has a love-hate relationship with Anthropic and OpenAI, he needs them because they're still buying a crap ton of chips. So the IPO will be successful. I don't know if the stock, like SpaceX IPO was successful. It's just, it was a disaster for anyone who actually bought the stock. But Elon raised $86 billion. Like at the end of the day, the stock is the stock. They have $100 billion in cash now on the balance sheet. It was successful. It's just someone had to hold the bag for them to get that $86 billion. And I think the same thing's going to happen with Anthropic. Now, granted, NVIDIA's invested in Anthropic a long time ago, so they will be up heavily on their position. They're probably not going to sell, so they don't need to buy net new shares, but they did just put in $10 billion 3 months ago. They put $30 billion into OpenAI. So there's still a ton of money right there. Arthur, thank you for the super chat. I watched the MIT save a pregnant woman from a burning building. Years later, I saw her at Starbucks, and she said a MIT advisor to buy Palantir at $7. She 20x'd her portfolio in 3 years. What a great guy. Arthur, I can't really argue with some of the facts that you were laying out in that super chat. So deeply appreciate the acknowledgement of what I've done. The second part, the Palantir part, is probably a little bit more true than the pregnant woman in a burning building, but that company helped a lot of us here. Meta 571, Uber 80.17, and speaking of Palantir, they've held this freaking 40% move so nicely in the midst of all the ugly headlines. They have not lost 170, which to me is the street getting a lot more excited about the growth that they've put up and the inevitability that their growth, is likely not to slow down. Nvidia, are we going to lose 210 today? We lost 214.73s when we topped out yesterday. The pregnant woman saved a mitt from the bill. That's probably what would have happened, bro. I'm not a fighter, guys. Like, I'm not confrontation's not my thing, Like intellectual confrontation in a debate, I'm all for it. As Rocket Lab falls below 67. But I've never got into a fight in a physical fight. Is that surprising to you guys? Would you have guessed it? I've never actually kids get into a fight at school. Yeah, that's never been me. I don't necessarily know how to fight. Broadcom's about to lose 350, and that's going to be so ugly. For this to actually see the 340s again would be a little annoying. But maybe that's what we're going to have to see. U.S. Justice Department says it and the FBI have seized platforms operated and used by Chinese state-sponsored hackers to target U.S. critical infrastructure. U.S. says it has disrupted Chinese hackers that broke into NASA, Federal Reserve, the NIH, and the U.S. Senate. Yeah, there's no way in hell Lutnick and the Commerce Department is going to be like, sure, Apple, you can buy Chinese memory chips, when the Justice Department and the FBI is announcing that they've seized platforms operated and used by Chinese state-sponsored hackers to target U.S. critical infrastructure. It doesn't feel like the Chinese are easily going to be able to sell into the United States or even buy NVIDIA chips as easily either. But, if that's the case, Apple's going to keep increasing prices. You're going to have an inflation issue on consumer electronics. So, Trump's kind of in a rock and a hard place here with trying to figure out what's the right strategy. Palantir 175, Rocket Lab losing 67, CrowdStrike 187. I mean, that headline is exactly the reason why CrowdStrike trades at the multiple that it trades at, and Palo Alto as well. I mean, both these stocks are basically at all-time highs. Palo Alto has more than doubled from the lows. The CEO, shout out to Nikesh, bought 10 million of his stock at the bottom on March 30th. I mean, he absolutely bottom ticked it. And he probably had some inclination that in a world of AI, cybersecurity is going to matter a lot more than just the revenue growth of these companies, but the sentiment of these companies is going to be in favor. Did you tell Hannah that Harvard waitlisted you? So I'm happy you brought this up, Connie. Hannah, no one thinks I actually got waitlisted from Harvard. They think, you know how we were saying the other day, the older you get, you lose your memory. And so like the other day, you guys were saying, I'm so old, I don't even know my age anymore. And I was the other day, someone asked, how old are you? I was like, am I 28? Am I 29? Am I 27? The older you get, that happens. You guys kept saying I didn't get waitlisted into Harvard. And so I'm going back. I'm like, that was 10 years ago. Am I lying to myself? Did I actually not get waitlisted? I'm actually asking myself, is my memory that bad that I legit have been lying about this the whole time? I went into my emails, okay? I took the screenshot just for this moment. This was part of the message that I wrote to Dallas Perkins and Sherry Hall. These were the two debate coaches at Harvard. Look at what I say right there. I am writing to ask if you could recommend that I be taken off the wait list at Harvard University. I would like to debate in Harvard's program. This is from June 30th, 2015. I found that in my AOL. I don't care if you guys think that's fake or you don't believe it, or that I went on Microsoft Word and I typed that up myself. I don't care what you say. That is an actual screenshot from an actual email. I needed to prove to myself that I wasn't going crazy and that I actually did get waitlisted. Because at some point I was like, well, I don't have the email from Harvard. Did I lose my memory over 10 years? Am I actually just making this up? So you can say it's fake all you want, but that came from my AOL from 10 years ago. And now I feel a lot more confident that I actually was waitlisted. And they clearly lost the debate. Yes, exactly. I lost the debate. They emailed back and they were just like, hey, we appreciate you reaching out, but there's not much we can do. And it's Harvard, it's like I don't know if the debate coach has that much sway over if someone can get into Harvard at the end of the day. But I tried. I did the same for Stanford. Stanford didn't waitlist me. They just straight up rejected me. But Harvard, at least I thought I had a shot. NVIDIA right there, 210.50 as that goes red. So yeah, there's your proof. I don't care if you guys believe it or not anymore. But I legit needed to know that I wasn't freaking losing my mind on this. Here's some commentary on the Fed and some of this PCE data we got this morning as we are seeing inflation still tick up, highest read since October 2024.
Avoid rate hikes down the road. Definitely not the data that backs up rate cuts. The problem is underlying inflation and that keeps the threat of rate hikes in play. The inflation data for the Fed's preferred indicator surprising to the upside. Here's the sorry, that's the wrong screen here. We have the headline year-over-year inflation at 3.7%. Take out food and energy, that's 3.3%. Focus on services, energy and housing, the so-called super core, and it's 3.9%. Nationwide chief economist Kathy Bostjancic, she writes, these high inflation readings should keep the FOMC overall in a hawkish mood and poised to raise rates if we do not see significant cooling in the coming months. Probability is kind of reflecting that, 40% for September, so still not a 50% probability, 55 for October, and then rising towards a much more confidence in a rate hike in December, 75% probability. At the same time, the readings on growth, fairly solid, strong durables, goods orders, but mixed data on the consumer. Income up 0.4%. Take out inflation, though, and the real spending rate was pretty good at 0.3. And then spending 0.2, but take out inflation, that's just 0.01 for real spending. The personal savings rate remaining low at 3%. Joe Basuelos this morning, he titled his piece, Inflation is Not Going Gently into That Good Night. Several Fed committee members, they have decided it's time to recognize that. The question is whether there are others, whether there's a majority, and whether the Fed chairman has reached the same conclusion, guys.
Yeah, it's a busy week for you, Steve.
The probability now for a rate hike is 38.1%. It's actually down from 42 yesterday, which was really important. Look, I don't think they're going to raise rates, but once again, this inflation data this morning wasn't horrible, but it wasn't amazing. And it brings up that inevitable question of like, will they do it just to establish enough credibility in order to, get the market to stop questioning if the Fed is willing to actually deal with inflation? And again, I don't think they're going to do it because I think if these headlines are real with Trump and Iran, you're going to see oil fall off a cliff eventually. That's part of the reason I think the airlines and cruise lines could do somewhat well. 81.67 on oil. And you're not going to need to, but like if they do it just for the sake of saying that they care about inflation, it kind of will inevitably potentially have the market digest it and move on. And maybe it's actually a good thing because we got it over with. But I think more likely than not, it's going to create some headwinds going into the end of the year. AMD losing a decent chunk of the pump today, but still up 1%. Abercrombie up 33%. This is the biggest mover today. But I don't actually think we're going to get the hike. It's just this inflation data, once again, is not what we want to see. SoFi, losing a lot of it as well. Even though SoFi is 19, again, a hike would not be good for SoFi, but a lot of that pump gets faded if you start having Fed members think about getting that rate hike. They'll probably hold rates because of the hawkish talk. Yeah, probably. I mean, that's more likely than not what I think. I mean, that's what they've been doing basically for a year at this point. That wait list is fake news. Guys, I'm telling you, it's not fake. Like, you're going to literally make me pull up my AOL email to show you sending the letter. Like, I'm telling you, it's not fake. I had to prove it to myself. And I proved it to myself yesterday. Vistra up 1.72%. S&P inclusion on SoFi. Yeah, look, SoFi is eligible, right? You need to be 21 billion. They're 24 billion right now. Even if they lose $1, they'll still be, even if they get to like 1780, they'll be eligible. I mean, if Reddit and Marvell got in, SoFi growing at 40% should freaking get into the S&P 500. It's not that complicated. Now, granted, Reddit got in and then it pumped and dumped, so I don't even know if that's going to help SoFi, but at least it'll create some more institutional flows. Show us the email. You guys really don't believe me. Why would I lie about this? Why would I freaking lie about this? Look at that. April 5th, 2016. Letter to Dallas Perkins and Sherry Hall. Is this AI? There's like, you can't like, here, there's the app moving up and down. There's not a screenshot. Like, you guys don't want to believe it anymore? That's on you guys. It's not on me anymore. At this point, this is on you guys. Here's the news on the OpenAI executives leaving as well, which is, I think, creating some bad sentiment on OpenAI and unfortunately hurting Broadcom and Oracle here.
The whole bit. Morning, Kate.
Yes, Carl. Covered time. Very interesting this week. But OpenAI, as you mentioned, losing another top executive this time. It's the person helping lead the company's massive data center build out. CNBC confirmed OpenAI's head of data centers, Chris Malone, has officially left the company. He joined OpenAI last year after working on infrastructure over at Meta and Google throughout his career. He did help oversee OpenAI's ambitious data center build out. The company is targeting roughly $600 billion in compute and spending by 2030 from what we've reported. And Malone's exit does also come as data centers becoming sort of a tense issue out there, political issue ahead of the midterm elections, a lot of local pushback, and then having enough compute overall is really key to OpenAI's revenue growth ahead of its IPO. Malone is one of the latest in a string of high-profile departures in the past 6 months or so. We had revenue chief Denise Dresser, former CEO of Slack, announced she was leaving a couple of weeks ago, and there have been a handful of former Salesforce executives too who have now gone back to the software giant. They joined her at OpenAI, went back to Salesforce. We're starting to get reports of that this week. And then you had longtime executive Brad Lightcap also announcing his exit this month. Fiji Simo stepped down for health reasons. This was last month. 4 other executives total have left since April. The turnover, guys, is getting particular attention because, well, for a couple reasons. OpenAI, of course, is preparing for what could be a massive IPO. Company confidentially filed in June. CFO Sarah Fryer recently told employees, from what I reported, company will be public in 2027. We also heard from president of this company, Greg Brockman, the other week, pushing back on concerns about some of the departures. He told CNBC last week the turnover isn't actually that atypical, as he called it, but he did claim that it gets more scrutiny because OpenAI is so much in the spotlight right now, guys.
Why do we think people are leaving OpenAI, guys? Because I'm trying to figure out the conclusion I come to is that these people have vested equity. They don't really care about the mission, about being there, because again, they have their equity. They've been there already for so long. They don't need to like be at the company to have the equity vest, which means they're going to get rich regardless, or at least they'll be able to sell at some point regardless, even if they can't sell the IPO print itself. And it goes back to qualitatively, they don't want to be at the company because there's something in the company that's not sitting well with them. Like, I just don't understand how you leave what could be, like, theoretically, SoftBank didn't put $40 billion into OpenAI at $1 trillion valuation to have them be a $2 trillion company. Like, there's people betting this is going to be a $10, $15 trillion company one day, and it will control the majority of how the world accesses artificial intelligence. You don't leave that rocket ship unless you think, unless you think there's some issues with the engine of that rocket ship, and it's not necessarily the type of rocket ship you thought you were hopping on in the first place, unless you think the leadership on that rocket might end up crashing it. Like, if there's some level of fear and hesitation, and this is, we're not talking about junior engineers or this is a chief revenue officer, head of data centers, head of sales. Like, I went back to Salesforce. Like, that just, I could not believe that. Like, out of all places you go back to Salesforce, which is growing 7% year over year, over OpenAI, which is growing like 500% year over year. Like, it is weird. And I think it's important to ask these questions as retail investors if we're thinking of buying the stock, because you can't let the VCs gaslight you into thinking that this is normal. Like, no chief revenue officer leaves 3 months before going public. It's confusing, to say the least. And I think we need more answers than not to these questions. Palo Alto 339. As that's flat. There's a headline right here by Bloomberg. Palo Alto explored acquiring Datadog and Okta. Palo Alto held talks with Okta and Datadog in 2025 when Datadog was worth $40 billion. Datadog right now, their market cap, that stock also made a massive move this year, is now $82 billion. The company's still evaluating deals around AI security and observability and exploring different acquisitions. Palo Alto already made 3 acquisitions in the past year. So I think Datadog would have been harder to justify given how big it is, but they have been growing a bit more inorganically and consolidating. Is Datadog up today? Datadog is up about 3%, potentially based on that headline as well. I think it's because of Sam Altman. Yeah, I mean, it is kind of crazy that the 2 biggest AI companies of our lifetime in the frontier lab space have leaders that are just horrible at communicating to the public. Like, Dario saying everyone's going to lose their job. It's just, and I've listened to Dario's full context about his statement about losing jobs. And when you listen to it in the full context, you can have some sympathy for what he's saying. But at the end of the day, it's like you have to have some street sense. Like maybe everyone's going to lose their jobs, but you don't say it. Especially if you're, it's like Leopold, right? It's like, well, yeah, AI is going to go to the moon, so I'm just going to lever up because it's going to keep going up. It's like, that's not how the market works. It's like, Dario, okay, there's going to be a lot of unemployment here because this technology is really advanced. But like, if you want to get investors to ambassador your stock, you kind of can't say that. And if you want to get politicians to allow you to build data centers, you can't say that stuff. If anything, you have to have a more optimistic view on how AI will empower workers while acknowledging that some jobs will cease to exist. If we have robo-taxis everywhere, there won't be people driving taxis. Like that's inevitable. That's just math, right? Like if the car is driving yourself, you're not going to need anyone to drive it. So that job's going to be gone. But the ability to talk about the timeline and the trajectory and the empowering nature, the agency that AI gives you, something that Palantir has been doing very well, is what gets people to want to invest in you and care about you as a company and feel good about holding your stock. And I don't think Altman or Dario even kind of understand that. Jensen does, which is why he pushes back so much. But Jensen's just one guy at the end of the day. And so we're gonna have to see how this ends up playing out. But obviously the earnings from NVIDIA today are going to be super, super important as we get into it. Palantir right there, 175. Not seeing any other major crazy headlines today. The PCE and Meta stuff was the big news that we got today. Wolf Research reiterated their SpaceX buy at 175. JP Morgan came out at 240. Evercore reiterated Meta at 860 on the day. Ashfrey, thank you for the super chat. I brought my girlfriend to the August meetup last year, gave Amit a PSA 10 Palantir card. I actually showed Hannah that card today. It's in my living room. I have this like shelf of like gifts that a lot of you guys give me at the meetup. She legit saw that card this morning. After a brief chat, he suggested we get married. We are now engaged. I think I did. I don't think he's lying there. I think you were the guy who I was like, where's her ring, right? I tend to do that to most couples that I see at the meetups. I was like, all right, so where's the ring? I don't think he's lying about that. So, all right, cool. There you go. You're engaged now. That's amazing. He also says, P.S. Josh Brown told me over dinner that Amit is cool. That's a true story. Shout out to Josh Brown. He's awesome. Hopefully we can get Josh Brown on Basis Points again. He was the first guest in January. But Josh Brown is awesome. Yeah, I think I did say that. I was like, where's the ring? But I say that to every couple that I meet. I always like tease the guy on where's the ring. Because some of you guys that come to the meetup, dude, you're like been together for 4 years, 5 years. And then I want to get nosy. I'm like, all right, so where's the ring? I say this as someone who's so single. It's like hilarious every time. But yeah, shout out to you, man. Thank you for being here. And happy you enjoyed the meetup. NVIDIA right there, 210.76. Ethereum still at 2,400. Shout out to Cactus Jack. Shout out to him. He has been amazing. Again, a lot of that news you guys have been accessing through that terminal, which has been amazing as well. And he's part of the reason I bought Meta last night, seeing that. I mean, it was funny that the overnight markets, Meta didn't even react to the state trial settlement. And then this morning it was up 4%. I didn't sell, obviously. But the point is like just being able to have that access to information and then having the overnight markets give you the liquidity to be able to buy when the news hasn't even hit the mainstream. That's just a question of speed of information, which is, part of the reason the terminal has been doing so well. Okay, what else do we have? I'm looking at some of the other NVIDIA sell side projections. Amit, are you adding to the Broadcom sell-off? I'm not adding to anything today until we see NVIDIA's earnings. I would love to add to Broadcom. I added at 370 2 weeks ago. I would want to see what NVIDIA says because quite frankly, if they dump, we will get Broadcom into 330s. If they pump, then it is what it is. But a lot of these stocks in the semi space can be falling knives, CoreWeave, Nebius, Micron included, if NVIDIA craps the bed, as all of them have now turned red. And again, it's like we know NVIDIA is not going to mess up. But, oh, by the way, guys, Meta lawsuit news, hold on. Again, more stuff. What more stuff? Meta lost the lawsuit? What are you guys saying? Well, if they did, that probably coincides with the settlement. Hold on, let me pull it up. Meta's not getting hit right here. Oh, what do you mean Meta lost the lawsuit? No, I think Meta. No, I think that's not a new piece of news. Oh, you guys saying the $16 billion settlement? Yeah, we know that. Yeah, I think a bunch of you guys just saw that piece of news. Yes, the $16 billion settlement. For those that are, yes, they had the $16 billion settlement. That is correct. That is not necessarily new. Meta, right? They're getting a little bit more of a pump at 5. I mean, they technically, yeah, they did lose the lawsuit. It's not a legal loss. It's a settlement, but I mean, it's a $26 billion loss that they are engaging right there. So, okay. So the big news yesterday was actually the former New York Fed president, Bill Dudley, wrote an article on Bloomberg about how the bubble is going to pop. So this is the first time you've had a former Fed president actually make a market prediction. He outlined like 7 different ways in the article that the AI bubble pops. And it was actually really, really interesting when you read the article, because he's like definitive on this idea that market's going to pop. And like this AI story is all full of crap. And like, look, Fed presidents have issued different opinions before and they've made statements, but the fact that like he came out with a full-on article, almost like a Michael Burry type of style prediction of here's how it's going to happen and, you know, what's going to go through, I thought was quite incredible. His big argument is that earnings growth is going to be unsustainable as ASTS loses $60 right there. Again, Meta, the news was that $16 billion settlement. That's why that stock is up. Technically losing the lawsuit, but also technically not losing the lawsuit. But for Dudley to come out and say that, why are we listening to an economist talk about markets? It's a good point. Now, granted, he was a relatively important economist being in charge of the New York Fed, but for him to say that is a long article of him outlining how he was like definitive as Bitcoin loses 78, that this market will crash. And he used the Shiller PE, the Buffett ratio. Now, all of that stuff I know is old news because for the past 3 years, all those signals have been screaming that it's a market top and we've only been going higher. But his broader argument is that stocks are expensive relative to earnings growth, and earnings growth is unsustainable. So when earnings growth slows down, it's going to collapse. And his bigger argument is that the hyperscalers will absolutely stop spending CapEx in the next year. He's basically saying by the end of 2027, because it's going to be unsustainable for them to keep spending, and the ROI is not going to be calculated as anything meaningful. And if that happens, obviously the NeoClouds, NVIDIA, like all those names that are a byproduct of that hyperscaler CapEx, which Jensen thinks is going to be like 5-7 trillion by 2030. Semi-analysis thinks it would be like 11 trillion by then. Bill Dudley's like, it's going to stop starting next year. I don't necessarily agree with that, but I think it was interesting that you have some people that never really make market predictions feel so compelled, because he doesn't have to do this. He's not short the market, right? Maybe he is, I don't know. But like, he doesn't have to, he's not selling subscriptions on Substack. Like, this guy was a very important New York Fed president for 2 decades. Like, he doesn't need to be making these hyperbolic statements, but the fact that he is, it was one of those things where I think you're going to, and this goes back to NVIDIA earnings. Jensen's going to have to calm people down on these earnings, because you've got New York Fed presidents making Michael Burry-like articles about how everything is going to just go to crap. Soon, by the way. He's like, end of 2027, it's over. Which means it would be priced in, you know, earlier in the year of next year. It might even start to get priced in now, you know, 16 months before it happens. So I don't necessarily agree with all of his analysis, but the fact that you have that type of public opinion coming out there goes to show how much negative sentiment there still is. Now, that is technically the alpha, as Bloom loses everything it had today, 227 down to 214. But that sentiment is obviously still there. Yeah, he's not selling a Substack subscription. Like, he doesn't need to be hyperbolic, right? I mean, the guy is well respected in the economic world. So for him to put out that statement, I thought was surprising. DG, thank you for the super chat. Amit, I'm the quiet old guy who has been watching since the fall of 22. Your coverage and perspectives are realistic. My wife gets her ass to work when you ring the bell. Not muted here. I love it. Thank you, sir. Thank you for being here. And thank you for keeping up with the channel. Fall of 22. Wow. So you've been here for a while. We started the market open in March of 22. And I was going back on some of the old market open videos the other day. I think we've gotten a little bit better since then. But the bell ring too I think I showed you guys a month ago, like the old bell ring. I ringed it like twice. It was like such a horrible bell. Or like such a horrible level of enthusiasm I had to ring the bell. I was like, yeah, guys, I ordered this from Amazon the other day. I feel like we should ring a bell because it's the market open. And it was like, ching, ching. And then that was it. That was over. Whereas now we actually have some excitement. SanDisk, are we getting green here? SanDisk a little bit, 1488. But still relatively stuck for the majority of the day. NVIDIA continues to be flat at 211. I did sell some puts on NVIDIA yesterday at 190. I collected like $40 of premium, so it wasn't anything special. But, I mean, if it actually goes to 190, sure, I'll be happy to buy it again. I don't think it will. If it does, it really takes a 10% decline from here. It's like, okay. But I think if it really takes a fall, 200, 195-ish is where we go. If we actually go to 190, then I would imagine the rest of the broader market takes a bit of a hit as well. So we're going to have to see. As Meta keeps going up. All right, 584, that's back. Fell to 561. For those that bought the dip around 560, that is green. I think a lot of us have a relatively large Meta bag already. So at least this is recovering some of it. That's also the issue with stop losses, right? You might get stopped out really quickly and then the market goes right back up. So you kind of have to be okay with losing some of those shares and not dealing with the downside pressure. Yeah, I would imagine the lawsuit result is bullish. I would not think it's not. This is the actual article. I'm looking at it right now that Meta put out, calling on TikTok and YouTube to join us. This is exactly what they said. Does that mean you're bearish on a video? Selling a put is bullish, remember, because if you're selling a put, you're agreeing to buy shares at a lower price. So if I was buying a put, that would be bearish. But I think anyone, Jason said it right yesterday, but anyone who's buying calls and options, if you don't get a big move, the theta decay is just going to kill you. So I feel like either selling calls or selling puts here is not a horrible move. While this is an important step, the fact is that teens move fluidly between dozens of apps a day. All platforms should empower parents and support teens by putting the same prep measures in place, because we know that when teens are restricted on one app, they simply move together. For meaningful progress to happen, we urge TikTok and YouTube to join us and State Attorney General in adopting this new standard. The standard are night mode, school mode, time limit, 2-hour daily time limit that can only turn off with a parent's permission. Expiry is this Friday for those puts. Regular prompts, teens will receive prompts every 15 minutes of continuous screen time. Hidden likes, teens won't see the number of likes on their posts. Wow. Okay, so they're really getting rid of a lot of the insecurity issues that, I mean, quite frankly, a lot of teenage girls, there's been a lot of academic studies on this, have been judging themselves based on their social media engagement. And the academic research is pretty obvious there. Like when you see Kim Kardashian getting 1 million likes and you're in 10th grade and you get 15, like that stuff, it does create an impact. It's just now Meta seems like they're actually doing something about it here. Disabling cosmetic surgery and extreme makeup filters, age-appropriate content restrictions, unwanted contact from strangers, reporting and ongoing protection from harmful contact, and strengthening our parent control. Okay, look, here's the thing. The ball is now in the court of these other social media apps. The thing is, YouTube doesn't really have YouTube's not social media. Like it is, but it's more content entertainment. Like the only other social media is really TikTok, right? Reddit's also more content. Reddit's not like likes and stuff. Like Instagram and Facebook is where you have likes. I guess X. But, Meta's not talking about X right here. They're talking about TikTok and YouTube. So now it kind of looks bad if TikTok and YouTube, don't somewhat agree to this, right? So it is kind of a one-up from Zucks and putting the ball in their court. It feels like someone's going to make a documentary about this, bro. Like Zucks in the courtroom being like, all right, this is how we're going to actually solve this. If we're going down, everyone's going down. We're going to pay the money, but they're going to pay the money. Our engagement's going to take a hit. Their engagement's going to take a hit. Like they are not easily letting this business model collapse right now. 495 on Microsoft. Yeah, 100%. Reddit would be down massively if it was mentioned by Meta. Meta, I think, basically thinks X and Reddit are not big enough to even care about, whereas YouTube and TikTok are the ones that matter. So their cost basis on Iran, 43. It's like 43.50, something like that. So I'm hoping Iran does well also. Iran, we're like 40 today, right? 40.25. I've been holding this thing for like 5 months, dude. It's just like, I've been thinking it's going to get a Nebius CoreWeave type of move, and then I would sell it. But also, if they get a really big hyperscaler deal, I don't think I have to sell it, right? Like if they can actually show that their 5 gigawatts of contracted power is resulting in deals, it's just they haven't done it yet. And it's so confusing that some of these other smaller neo clouds are getting deals, but Iran is not. So on earnings, if they don't get a deal, I just feel like a lot of the thesis is not broken. It's just once again taking a lot more time. And in a world of this much demand, I don't understand why they're not signing more deals. So we're going to see on earnings in like a couple of days. See what happens. Movie titled The Anti-Social Network. Dude, it's actually a really good movie. I think I've seen that movie like 5 times. I think I saw it for the first time in 2011. And like, you know, that's when Facebook was still growing and like they just reached 1 billion users. And I didn't really understand how important I was using the product every day. I didn't understand how important it was. I didn't understand how fast it was growing. And I didn't understand how important Zuckerberg was going to become as a public figure. But it happened. And, you know, now they're paying 20 billion in lawsuits. Did you watch the Spotify film? If you're talking about the Netflix like mini series on Spotify, yeah, I've seen that, where they like talked about how Daniel Ek fought the record labels. It was like 3 episodes, right? It was really good. I saw that 2 years ago. It was always exciting to see how these people actually build their empire. Okay, what else do we have? Let's look at some of the options that have been traded today the most. You have Tesla, Meta, Nvidia, Apple, Micron in your top 5. Meta, you have 300,000 calls, 130,000 puts. SpaceX, Palantir, SoFi, AMD are up there. Kraft Heinz, why are 81,000 calls being traded on Kraft Heinz and only 1,300 puts? There's got to be some news on Kraft Heinz. The stock is flat. This is an OG Buffett stock. Kraft Heinz, that is weird, dude. This is not a name you see pop up. Someone just bought $400,000 worth of calls as well for $26. There's no headline. Oh, is this a Kraft Heinz to transfer stock exchange listing to the New York Stock Exchange from the NASDAQ? Okay, so that's index funds that are going to have to rebalance. Okay, so that's a nothing burger. That's not any specific news. AI catch up, yeah, I don't know if that's going to change things, but that's just more natural option buying on index funds coming in, actually. It's not something to, I guess, stress about too much. Meta right there, 585. Let's see if we get back up to 590 here. Let's see if it makes a bigger move. Trump on Canada. I have the clip on that. Let's pull this up. Again, the Canadians announced those 50% retaliatory tariffs. This is what Trump said this morning about that.
Canada. I mean, it seems to me they had a really good deal, but this is all about the elections and throwing our elections. What is happening? Is there a way to end this?
Look, I don't know how you feel about Canada. They are one of the worst countries in the world to deal with. And this has gone on for many years.
Wait. Can we say this? I love Canadians and Canada.
Correct.
I do not like their administration.
Okay, well,
Right?
the administration and the previous administration too is terrible.
Yes.
But they have taken advantage of the United States for many decades, actually. They charge tariffs that are unbelievable, like on milk, 400%, and on like. And I just said, we're taking them on. And I took them on at the beginning, but we had so many other things to do because the country was a mess. But I said, we're going to take them on. We're going to stop it. And you saw the Lake Ontario. You know, people thought I was kidding. But maybe I wasn't, because the last one you saw was the Gulf of Mexico, is Gulf of America.
I know.
So now we have a Gulf and we have a lake. Okay, you know, it's very simple. But look, I don't want to go into great detail because it's maybe boring to people, but to me it's not boring. They charge tariffs. They take advantage of us as though they were a state, and they're not a state. And they've taken our car industry, and they've taken our agriculture industry.
Yeah.
You know, the farmers can't sell anything in there because the tariffs are so enormous, and yet they want to sell in us without any tariffs. So I had a deal that was a pretty good deal. You know, quite good. and because they're afraid that I won't do any business. In other words, we won't trade. They don't have anything that we have to have. Okay, we can get by. I mean, there are a couple of things that would make it a little inconvenient, but we could get them elsewhere. And it's time to teach Canada you can't do this anymore. We lose $60 billion and really more than that, $60 billion a year with Canada.
Mr. President,
we can't do
I
that.
can't believe I have to say this to you. I have a network break. You could hold on, but I know you're busy. I so appreciate your time, sir.
Okay, so that's what you have with Trump's perspective on Canada. Again, I really don't think this Canada thing is going to last, this beef they have with Canada, for a long time. Carney and Trump were sitting at the World Cup laughing with each other. Like, I don't think they actually have any bad blood. I just think this is, negotiations that the trade representatives are navigating with. And Trump tends to be one of those negotiators that goes out and talks a lot of shit and, tries to create a lot of ruckus to get people to come to the table. And with Iran, that obviously hasn't worked. But with some of the tariff stuff last year, even though the U.S. gave up a lot of concessions, you did get more deals, especially in the Middle East. So the question is, can they do that with the Canadians here? And, does the U.S. have to give up a meaningful chunk of some of the tariffs that they were imposing to get something greater on both sides? But that's what we're going to have to see. NVIDIA, Street's expecting 97% growth, $92.2 billion. I think Jensen's going to give us 100%. There's no way the Street's guiding at 97 and they're 3% away from getting to 100%. Like, if they have to squeeze a couple more billion out of some of their bigger customers, I think they're going to do it. I think we're going to get triple-digit growth. EPS growing 200% year-over-year, gross margins of 75%, and free cash flow of $47 billion. So that's going to be really important for NVIDIA. I think they're going to beat all those numbers, except the margins. I think the margins are probably going to be flat. And if we get that, then that's going to be important. Yeah, that's kind of weird that he cut the president off for a network break. I mean, if you have the president on your network, you probably tell the advertisers to give you a couple minutes because, people are watching your show, which is why the advertisers are paying in the first place. But I think Glenn Beck and Trump have been friends for a long time, which is probably why he did his show in the morning. I mean, the one thing about Trump is he will do, the people he likes, he will do their show. It's the most random shows he'll do. These random New York Post reporters, he'll call them up and he'll give you all these quotes. And he'll proliferate all these different, ideas that are out there in the markets, just trying to figure out how to react to it. And it's been happening pretty much every day for 2 years. And during the height of the Iran war back in April, that was happening literally every hour with different information. I sold the NVIDIA puts for Friday. So I didn't collect a lot of premium on them, but I feel like they're relatively safe. So like $40 for, $19,000 of collateral. It's really nothing, but it's also like, hey, if I did want to buy it, that 190 range would be the way to buy it. 587 on Meta. Maybe this comes back as Bitcoin takes the hit. BTC. Wow. That was 81,000 yesterday, 77.6. Robinhood, Coinbase, MicroStrategy, not liking that as those are all down. Now they're still up a lot for this week, but obviously they're taking a bigger hit as they are as they're going red. Uber is 79.78. We have to blame Tanner. We cannot blame Tanner. Okay, we love Tanner. Tanner will tell you, I don't even think Tanner has a lot of Canadian dollars. Like, Tanner trades U.S. stocks. His only real Canadian stock is Shopify, which is listed on the New York Stock Exchange. And yeah, I don't think he does a lot of business in Canadian dollars anyway. So Tanner is more American than most people sometimes because he freaking loves investing in the U.S. markets. But it's not Tanner's fault. It's not any of the Canadians' fault. It's the United States and Canada negotiating on what are appropriate 15, 20, 30% tariffs on a variety of goods we do with each other. They're one of our biggest trade, especially for energy, dude. They're one, Trump can talk a big game all he wants, but we do a lot of business with Canada when it comes to energy. Now, they depend on us buying a lot of that energy, so it's not like they have all the leverage here, but it's not like we have all the leverage either. So I really just think it's them going back and forth. And it's not as aggressive as both sides are making it out to seem. Broadcom right there, 352. as that continues to go red. Do you still have Nebius? Yes, I still have Nebius. This one has also been stuck. Bought it at 230, then bought it at 178 in the course of July. I mean, the thing about Nebius and Micron is that a lot of the hype has just died. And the thing about hype is that when it dies, it's hard to get it back. And if the hype is going into crypto, if the hype is going into, honestly, value and safer stuff. I mean, Uber, which is not really a value play, but technically its price is a value play. If the hype is going into Uber and Airbnb and Netflix, then Nebius, which is still up 2x this year, Micron, which is still up 2.5x this year, like, okay, they don't go up 3x, 4x, but they still have amazing, amazing returns for those that were early. And it is what it is. Like, if you were early on those names, you deserve it. But if you're late, it's like complaining that Palantir is not at 200 yet. It's like, okay, well, it was at 100 for the majority of the year, 120. It was at 6 3 years ago, right? So it's like, okay, it's not at 200, but I'm not going to care that much because I took advantage of the dip. Nebius was at 80 for a good 3 months this year before it broke out. And I was not buying like crazy. So I'm not going to be upset that it's not running to 300 because it's like, okay, if you didn't take advantage when it was at 80, you know, you don't really deserve those gains. I just think a lot of people are upset because when it pumped to 280 after the earnings and everyone was like, okay, it's back to Nebius being Nebius. And then it just collapsed 2 days later. That's what kind of pissed people off about Nebius. And same thing for Micron, to be honest. But both of those stocks kind of consolidating here. HIMS, what are we looking at for HIMS? HIMS is at $30. That's down another 4%. As that is red. Shopify down 1.6. I mean, Shopify was at $97 for the majority of the year. 97 to call it 110. And now it's at 150. You know, it's made a nice, massive move. Same with Reddit that got to 120. So a lot of these names, I think that no one can complain this market has not given opportunities. Whether it's the semi names, whether it's the software names, whether it's the crypto name. I mean, MicroStrategy is up 40% in basically 2 weeks. Like, there have been sectors that have been Netflix 65 to 80, Uber basically the same 65 to 80, fell 10% after their earnings 3 weeks ago. Like, this market has been filled with opportunities, also filled with leverage, which took out a lot of people, but that also created even more opportunities. And so I don't think it's too crazy to say that if the market chills out for a little bit, then that's all right. This is the preview right here going into the print for NVIDIA, as the street's expecting about 97% growth.
AI era has a stock that's really gone nowhere this year. NVIDIA's up, 13% in 2026. The broader chip index, you can see on your screen, up 70%. That's one of the widest gaps between NVIDIA and its own sector on record. And the stock, unfortunately, just keeps getting punished on good news. It's fallen the day after earnings, 4 quarters running, every time after a beat. The question today isn't really whether NVIDIA delivers, it's why the stock stopped working. Cantor Fitzgerald points to 4 reasons. One is valuation. NVIDIA got so expensive that even a strong beat now reads, in their words, as sell the news. Of course, we know the valuation has improved. Another is rotation. Investors moving into rival chip names instead of crowding into NVIDIA because they're looking for more upside. There's the fear it's also losing the inference market to Amazon and Google's homegrown chips. And then hedge funds have actually piled in on the short side of this just over the last little while. And now the newest worry that comes up constantly in sell-side research, NVIDIA's bankrolling the very customers who buys its chips, backstopping billions of dollars in leases, an example of $105 billion for OpenAI, and taking stakes across the industry. Can be seen as a positive, also a negative. The credit market, though, has noticed. Morgan Stanley, starting coverage of NVIDIA's debt just this month, said that after recent widening, NVIDIA bonds are trading more like BBB credit than AA. Then the AA its balance sheet actually implies, roughly 25 basis points wider than.
Which is kind of crazy, because if there's any company in the stock market right now that has a balance sheet that should get a AA rating, it would be NVIDIA. Right? Like, even if you want to look at the hyperscalers are negative free cash flow. NVIDIA's taking all their free cash flow. So for NVIDIA's debt to be rated lower than some of these other companies that are out there, it goes to show how bad sentiment is around this company getting more than a $5 trillion valuation, even though it probably should be closer to like $7 trillion if you put a reasonable multiple on it, or at least a market growth multiple on it. And that's what Jensen's going to have to talk about today in terms of calming down a lot of the nerves in the credit markets and obviously in the equity markets.
Similarly rated peers. So watch what NVIDIA does to actually push back on that narrative about the circular financing, financial engineering, etc. OneTel, it just split its sales into 2 buckets, the 4 big hyperscalers on one side, everyone else on the other. So AI clouds, enterprise, governments, et cetera. And it's telling Wall Street it's growing beyond the 4 biggest names, the same ones now building chips to compete with it. They're focusing on the other bucket. The numbers, though, almost aren't the point, since a beat is assumed. What moves the stock now is the story NVIDIA tells around earnings, especially the qualitative stuff in the call.
Yeah, the story's so important. Christina, do you expect to see additional disclosure to combat those concerns around circular financing and the Bank of NVIDIA, as people have been calling it?
Unfortunately, not, because you're relying on 6 other financiers, especially for that $500 billion mark. And what we don't know is what's the criteria for companies. Is it NVIDIA just saying, vouching for the relationship? How do you decide who's going to get the money? And NVIDIA is supposed to backstop up to 25% of certain deals. Is it going to be less than that? How many have they started to backstop already? So I'm not sure we'll get that much in terms of details because it's so fresh. All of that is so fresh. I think, if anything, Jensen Huang will probably push to the ramp of Rubin, which is the latest iteration in Q3. He's going to talk about that. They'll talk about gross margins not getting hurt, because that is a big concern for a lot of investors. And overall, they're going to be speaking about the other bucket that I mentioned, the fact that sovereign AI is growing, the fact that the smaller enterprise business is growing, so that they're less reliant on the hyperscalers that are moving away from NVIDIA.
Yeah, a lot of product anticipation and obviously financing.
Part of the reason Jensen has to calm down the nerves is because you get Time magazine covers like this that just were released. OpenAI's Sam Altman and Greg Brockman on the cover. The title, Trust Us. You know, I don't think the mainstream media understands how much people do not trust these guys, but this is why Jensen's got to clean up their shit on earnings. You know, it's like if Time has to put out a cover claiming that you should trust OpenAI, it means no one trusts OpenAI. It's just that simple. No one. Now, they trust Jensen, but Jensen's really associated with OpenAI. So, I mean, you're going to have some level of Jensen making sure the market actually has enough trust in this broader AI revolution, because no one wants it to be a fluke. But I don't think these Time magazine covers are going to get people to believe it. I mean, the fact that you have to put the 2 words, trust us, it's almost like it's a joke. It's like, I feel like Time knows it's controversial enough to get the people riled up because no one actually trusts them. But they do trust Jensen. Like, a lot of people have faith in Jensen. He is seen in a totally different light than Altman or Dario. I think that's part of the reason why Jensen has started doing interviews with Alex Karp, because Alex Karp also gets a lot of trust because he's not, you know, saying the sort of same things that AI is going to take your job, and he's talking about the models actually being a commodity and the implementation of the models being more important and actually championing American business, right? Whereas Jensen doesn't do that many interviews. I don't think he's ever done an interview with Dario. He's done one with Sam Altman, which was a CNBC kind of like press conference thing that they said they would invest $100 billion into OpenAI. That ended up being false. It ended up only being $30 billion. And, you know, that's where a lot of that trust gets eroded from the mainstream media. NVIDIA right there, 211. Did they buy that cover? You know, so Salesforce founder Mark Benioff bought Time for $190 million in 2018. So what's his name? Brett, I think his name is Brett Taylor, he was the co-CEO of Salesforce with Mark Benioff. He left 2 years ago. He's now the chairman of the board of OpenAI. So Brett Taylor knows the guy who owns Time, who's the CEO of Salesforce, because he was also the co-CEO of Salesforce, very well. And he's also on the chairman of the board for OpenAI. So I don't know if they bought the cover, but I would imagine getting on the cover is not the hardest thing in the world when you can call up your chairman and say, hey, can you talk to the guy who owns the magazine and put us on the cover? Which once again goes back into the broader trust argument of like, these people are just all in their elite circle and they want to try to get them, you know, the masses to believe that you should trust them, when in reality, is there anything meaningful to trust? Jensen's viewed in a different light, and I think on earnings, Jensen's going to have to continue to show why that's so important. Abercrombie and Fitch, 40% on the day, kind of ridiculous. I mean, it was a good earnings, but my goodness, 149 as that continues to go green. ASTS is in that space bucket with Rocket Lab and Lunar and Redwire. All the space names have just kind of fallen apart ever since the SpaceX IPO. I mean, Rocket Lab's down 50% from that time. ASTS basically the same, right? ASTS was 130, now it's at like 60. So granted, they probably shouldn't have ever got there. I think that's fair. But the space names are trading with the SpaceX algo, and SpaceX has lost a lot of value as well. So that's what we're saying. Circular marketing. Yeah, exactly. Circular market. Again, that's circular financing news. That stuff's also going to be really freaking important. And Jensen, this whole NVIDIA bank thing, yeah, Jensen's absolutely going to have to discuss what's happening there. Can you do a yes, no poll if we trust them? That's a good poll. Let me ask that right now. I feel like, so it's interesting because there's the people that are against data centers that don't trust a lot of what's happening in AI. Then there's investors that also don't trust certain segments of AI because, they just feel like a lot of it is hyped up. And then there's the broader public that like uses their products and sees the value in it, but also doesn't really know who Sam Altman is. And so there might be indifferent, but when they hear these sort of salacious statements, they sort of, but it's kind of the same thing with Meta. I don't think a lot of people trust Zuckerberg either. Like I trust him as an operator. I don't know if I necessarily trust him as a human being. And I think a lot of people, because, Facebook doesn't have the best reputation either, have not trusted him for a while. Now, Sundar, I think different perspective. Sundar doesn't have that kind of Zuckerberg stench on him in terms of like people thinking all he wants to do is monetize people's attention, which has now cost him $30 billion in this lawsuit. But Dario and Altman do have that. And I don't know if that's going away anytime soon. It takes a lifetime to build reputation. It takes seconds to lose it. And once you lose it, it's tough for people to be excited to care again. Palo Alto, that's flat. Broadcom still down on the day. And then Marvell down about 0.23. Yeah, a lot of people hate Elon, but a lot of people also trust him. I mean, Elon, ever since he, went his political route, he obviously had a lot of people that just don't like him. But, in terms of executing on the company, I know he's a bit ambitious with his timelines. People do trust that he's going to do what he says, even if it takes time. Not everyone does. But I think there's a level of just like disdain when you hear some of the other AI CEOs that are out there. Salesforce down 1%, ServiceNow down 2%. NYC, thank you for the super chat. Amit, can we get Neil Dutta on one of these shows? I can make it happen. Dude, if you can make it happen, please. Yeah, Amit at akcoms.com. I'm a fan of him. He's a phenomenal economist from Bloomberg, and he's smart. Super, super smart. I think he did a podcast 2 weeks ago with Josh Brown, and the guy knows his shit really well. So 100%, if you can make that happen, send me an email, and I would love to make it happen. And I love that you were a Knicks fan as well. Dude, this will be the first year I go to a Knicks game because now I've like rejuvenated my Knicks excitement. Again, I was a Knicks fan back in 2011, tried to be a basketball player. It didn't work out, kind of lost love for basketball in and of itself. But then seeing Jaylen Brown win the championship, that was, or Jalen Brunson win the championship. Jaylen Brown went to the Sixers. It was pretty cool. It was pretty freaking cool. There might be a world where we get to have a conversation with Mr. Brunson. Let's just say that. There might be a world. I might have had a meeting last week with someone who's very close to Brunson. And maybe, I don't know if he'll actually do basis points, but we're going to see if we can make it happen. I feel like I should go to a Knicks game first, though, before he does the podcast. If he does the podcast, I want to be able to say, like, I've seen him play live, and I didn't just become a fan over the past 3 months after they won the championship. But that would be super fun. Because, I mean, look, I think we could talk to him about a ton of business stuff. Look, Brunson is doing a lot of stuff behind the scenes with business. And, the brand deals, the sponsorships, the endorsements, the companies they're building. He has his own podcast. Like, I've become a fan of that podcast. Like, it's not often you see NBA superstars during the